Wrap around, they score. The late penalty was coming against the Blues. Horvat stayed on top of it, picked up his own rebound, wrapped it around, and it's 3-2 the Islanders. Barzal to the empty net, 4-2 New York Islanders. 30.5 to go in this disappointing third period. Blues go 1-1 on the first two games of the road trip with a 4-2 loss to the New York Islanders.
Well, that's what it sounded like right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN last night as the Blues go into New York, go over to Long Island, and lose 4-2 on the road. It's a back-to-back. We're going to get all the excuses. Scheduled loss. Nah, man, not at this time of the year. You are trying like hell to fight for your playoff life, to tell your general manager, hey, this is a group that can win. You should be investing in this group, not sending pieces away. And instead, they go out there, they go up, they have an opportunity to prove themselves to their GM, to all of us, to the fans. No, 2-0 lead for the Blues midway through the second period, and they find a way to lose 4-2. Alex, the theme of this season has been for the Blues, hey, do they get up early? Do they get up on the opponent? And if they do, they're probably going to win the game. If they get behind, chances are pretty high that they're going to find a way to lose. Not last night. Last night, they get the lead, and they allow it to slip away. What did you see from the Blues last night?
I saw a team that didn't have the desperation in their game to win a hockey game. And I saw another team that had the desperation, that was sitting in fourth place in their division and fighting for their playoff lives. The Islanders outshot the Blues 33-21, and some of that was just junk time at the end where they pulled the goaltender and they got a couple of scoring opportunities. But at one point in the third period, the Blues were being outshot 5-2. In the third period, when you were down by a goal, there were 8 shots in the first, 5 shots in the second, 8 shots in the third. And on top of that, when you look at the shot attempts and just the overall chances, the New York Islanders put 33 on net. They had 19 that were blocked and 16 that missed the net. The Blues had 4 that missed the net and 13 that were blocked. One team wanted it. One team needed those 2 points, and the Blues did a good job in the first period, which might not really sound like a good job, but they weathered the storm. Like the Islanders brought it, Bannister said it, they weathered the storm. They opened up the second period. You got 2 really good plays that earned you scoring chances. One that was Shannon Neighbors picking off the puck and sending Toropchenko off to an odd man rush. And then Kyrou was rewarded from Brandon Saad working hard and stripping the puck. But then after they took the 2-goal lead, it felt like, no, we're good. We got it. We're 2-0. Our goaltender is going to keep us alive. Our defense is going to do it. Shen even said it postgame. We need to stop relying on our defense and goaltending to win games and start relying on our offense to win you hockey games. And to be a team that was down by a goal, that desperately needed points, that had an opportunity to climb within reach of Nashville, that was in a potential loss against the Montreal Canadiens, and you put 8 shots on goal in the third period. It's just not good. I think you're starting to see this team fall back into their old ways, what put them in the position to fire Craig Berube, and I believe you're not seeing that desperation from this team that you'd like to see from a team that knows they have a shot at the playoffs.
I don't know I think you probably feel this way, but watching the last handful of games, and look, I know they'd won 2 of the last 3, but let's be honest, the 2 victories weren't all that impressive. It feels like it's like watching a team knowing it's over. That's what it feels like I'm watching right now. It is kind of going through the motions. You get that 2-0 lead, you sit back a little bit, then you get punched in the face, you're down 3-2, and there is no, oh crap, we really need 2 points in this one. And I'm not being overly critical of them because, like, I didn't think that they were a playoff team coming into the year, and I think they kind of knew the expectations were lower on them. But watching them lately, it feels like a team that knows the dark cloud is rolling in and the storm is coming and the trade deadline is upon us, and who knows who's going to still be here. They look like a team that knows their season is already over.
You got certain players that I do feel like bring the fight every single night. Alexei Toropchenko is one of those guys. I think Jake Neighbors is one of those guys. I know Colton Parayko and Nick Leddy are those guys for how much ice time they eat. But you can't win hockey games when 3 guys are out there trying to do what it takes to win, when the rest of them are like, well, we'll figure it out. You had 3 players last night who didn't take a shot attempt.
This is who they are. Since January 4th, they have outshot their opponents. How many times do you guys think at 5-on-5?
Well, it's a BK question, so 1.
1 time. One
I
time.
didn't even get to answer. Way to go, man.
3-0 win against Washington. They outshot them in that game.
Well, they're like you.
Other than that, though, in your other 24 games since January 4th, you have outshot your opponent exactly 0 times at 5-on-5. In that stretch, they have been outshot by 13, 13, 11, 20, 10, 13, 16, 10, 11, and 12.
They haven't even been outshot by single digits once.
Well, they have, but those are like some of that is one.
I was like, whoa.
Woof.
That is 10 of your 25 games. You've been outshot by at least 10 at 5-on-5. This is not new. Last night was more of what they are. Like, this is a trend that we have seen even since Drew Bannister has taken over. Alex, how many times have we talked about it? Hey, if this power play continues to perform at the level that it was, yeah, you could maybe see this team fighting, scratching, and clawing, to use the old Mike Schultzism, to get into the playoffs. But that is a very fragile way to build your roster. It's a very fragile way to win, because power plays are a finicky thing. It's like building around a bullpen. One day you feel great about it. The next day your guy goes out there that you trusted, gives up 4 runs. You're like, oh, hot damn, we can't win this way anymore. So can you win that way? Sure. Is it sustainable? I don't know. Ask the Miami Marlins. Ask this year's St. Louis Blues. Not really. It's not particularly sustainable. You need excellent goaltending, a great and high-powered power play without a whole lot of high-powered shooters on your power play. See, really, you're relying on Jake Neighbors, Oscar Sundquist, and Jordan Bennington to get this team across the finish line. It just was never going to happen. I bought into it because I'm not very good at this, and I went against every fiber of my being, which said, with blinking red lights, this is not sustainable. And I was like, you know what? I'm watching the games. I'm having fun. I got caught up in the moment and said, I believe it, though, because look at them. They're so much fun. They're having a good time out there. I'm not having a good time anymore. I don't enjoy watching this team.
I'm not sure if I really ever had a good time this season. Maybe a little bit there for there
was a period of time there for a little bit where it was like, hey, man, I don't know. I think this team might have a little something. And they don't.
Yeah, and we were fooled by the 18 shots on goal and the goaltender standing on his head for 31 of them. I'm at the point now where I look at this roster and I don't see the slight fixes that make a difference. Now I'm starting to get to the point where I look at this roster and I say, you've got to overhaul the way that this team plays.
So that's what I wanted to get to next. What are the lessons from this? Because on February 11th, that's less than a month ago, you were sitting pretty. You were tied for the top wild card spot. You had about a 570 points percentage. You were 28, 21, and 2 at that point in the year. Well, now you are about 6 points out of a playoff spot, so you've dropped. You've also had multiple teams pass you up in the playoff standings. You are closer to the 8th overall pick today than you are to a playoff spot.
Vegas, Vegas, Vegas.
Talking about for the playoffs when the Blues are playing against the Vegas Golden Knights in round 1?
No.
Sphere, 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 sphere.
What's the lesson here? Like, when you look at the roster and how they're losing right now and how they prevent this from happening in the future, not even necessarily for next year, but whenever they get back to their winning ways, what are the lessons to be learned from this slump that has dropped them out of the playoffs?
I mean, one massive lesson, and we talked about this yesterday with Jeremy Rutherford, you've got to change the strategy of this team. This is not a rush team. You don't have the players to be a rush team. You don't have the shooters to be a rush team. That game last night, the reason you had, 20 shots on goal, it's because all of them were one and dones. There was no sustained zone time. I think ESPN Plus had it on their lower third during the first period. The Blues had probably 90 seconds in the first 15 minutes of offensive zone time, whereas the Islanders had 7. Like, there is no ability to retrieve pucks in the offensive zone by this team. Their offense solely comes from mistakes made by the other team, and you can't play that way. You cannot play that way. Teams that are in the playoffs, teams that are fighting for a Stanley Cup right now, do one thing. They go and they win puck battles. But the other part that I felt like we were getting to a good area with the Blues for how their defensemen played. Last night, 3 of the 4 goals that were scored on you were because you were too soft on the players. I mean, that first goal that was scored by Kyle Palmieri, look, it was a goal scorer's goal. You took it in on the goalie, and you went top shelf on him. But you know how you avoid that? Justin Falk shoving him off of the puck. He didn't touch Kyle Palmieri from the blue line to Joel Hofer. He didn't touch him. The wraparound by Bo Horvat 55 seconds in. Nick Leddy was just on his back, putting his stick in front of him while he circled the net to take the shot.
That's not what you want.
And even the second goal, which look,
he was one of 3 players with an opportunity on that play.
Absolutely. It was 3-on-1, I think, and Brandon Saad was watching the whole play happen. But even the second goal, like, look, that's a really good bounce that went to Pajot and right in front of the net. But, like, watch it. You had 2 defensemen that were standing on one side of the net, while Pajot was just like, whoop, I'm going to scoot on over here and take the shot when the puck bounces to me. There is no ability to push players off the puck right now on this defenseman. And look, I think Nick Leddy's played great this season. I love Colton Parayko. I've made that very clear. But you've got issues surrounding it other than those guys.
Yeah, I would agree with that because at least of late, from what we have seen, you're starting to see a couple more goals where guys are kind of just moving their way in. Like, think of the Zach Hyman goal in the game against the Oilers. I think
perfect.
2 of them, actually.
Yeah.
And it was on the power play, but again, it is. And it doesn't have to be the Chris Pronger cross-check. I mean, it goes down on the ice.
You can't do that in the league anymore.
To your point on that Falk goal from last night, can you just, like, slow him down by just touching him? You know, just touch him and push him to the outside a little bit. And he didn't do that at all. And I think that is an issue. And I think the other thing, too, to your point, they got to pick an identity. I haven't felt like the Blues have had an identity of what they want to be for the last 2 seasons, I think is fair to say, where I look at some guys, I go, okay, I think they can play a little bit of that grind it out, forecheck style of play. And then I look at, like, the top line, and I go, well, that line clearly has its best success when it's playing on the rush. I think you got to pick an identity. I think you got to pick a lane, and I think that is a lesson from really not just this recent slump, but the last 2 seasons for the St. Louis Blues. Figure out what way you're going to go and build this team moving forward.
And if you haven't figured it out after watching the team play last year and this year, not be able to create any 5-on-5 play because you're a rush team, you've got 4 20-goal scorers on this team right now, where 2 years ago, you had 2 guys that were at 30 goals. It's very evident that you're not a rush team. To win in the NHL, forechecking, size still matters.
I think size still matters, and it's a matter of if the Blues think that it does as well. And what I mean by that is, how many times, Alex, have we heard Doug Armstrong say, I think the way that the game is moving is towards a speed-based system. And he did that defensively. He moved to more of the puck-moving defenseman. That's what he put a priority on. Justin Falk, Torrey Krug, Nick Leddy all fit into that criteria. Scott Perunovich fits into that criteria. And so a lot of the guys that they have spent assets to acquire or spent resources to develop have fit into that criteria. Look at their forwards that they've acquired and or developed over the years. Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, Pavel Buchnevich, they're all speed-based players. Hell, even some of their bigger players are more speed-based. Like Toropchenko has some physicality, don't get me wrong, but at his heart of hearts, like, he's a speed guy. Even Colton Parayko, he's not like a physical presence.
He's one of the fastest players on the team.
He's really fast, though. And so they want to play with speed. But you look at these teams that are contending right now across the NHL, and we talked about this a couple of years ago when we went into the postseason. It was like they put together all of these different metrics, and you look at all these different ways that teams can win. What was the best way to determine the outcome of a series? It was to literally put the players on a scale and see which team weighed more. That was the most predictive way to find out who was going to win a series. The bigger team literally won. And so if you look at it across the NHL right now, like, think of these teams: Florida, Boston, Dallas, Nashville, even the Kings, the Golden Knights. These teams, a lot of them are built, even if they're not huge, they're built with forechecking presence. They're built with cycle games. Even Vancouver, man, they've got some great puck-moving players, but they commit to a style of play and they win with it. I don't feel like the Blues have committed to any one style of play since the Cup. I feel like they've been a team that's trying to play in multiple different ways with multiple different people pulling in multiple different directions. This offseason and at this deadline, my hope is that they just commit to one thing. I don't even care at this point what it is. If you want to be a rush team, man, go all in on being a rush team. Don't have a bunch of different players that are playing different ways. Don't have Kevin Hayes on the third line, who absolutely is not a rush-style player. Don't have a fourth line that's going to be playing the way that they are right now, which, by the way, I like. I like their fourth line right now. It's finally something that's come together.
They retrieve pucks.
BK finally likes a fourth line.
I think they're good. They're one of your better
Give
lines.
him time. He's going to want to trade Toropchenko
season
soon.
Long. I think they should re-sign Oscar Sundqvist. I think they should extend Toropchenko. I'd be cool with that. But, man, commit to something. Be a certain version of yourself because you haven't been that since 2019. It's been 5 years of trying to find your own identity.
I've just been watching this team try and play rush hockey, and like, look, when it clicks, it looks awesome, but they don't receive passes well. Like, when they're trying to play rush hockey, the passes aren't taken, and guys are turning it over in the neutral zone, and now you're going to have to swoop back around. The offense that they've been scoring has either been directly in front of the net, and they tweeted this out last night, like Jordan Kyrou this season scored like 13 goals in front of the net. He's got like a 26% shooting. Like, go to the net. It's going to score there for you. But they don't do that. If they're not doing that, they're skating in. They're scoring their goals from turnovers of the other team. And it is going to be very hard to play winning hockey and get to 95 points if you're relying on other teams to make mistakes, because the bad teams make mistakes. The good teams don't make mistakes. And that's the part that being a rush team, you're a rush team when you have elite players like Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. But when you're a team that doesn't have elite players in the game, you've got to have the ability to win puck battles. And I don't believe that they have a group that can win puck battles in the offensive zone.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. Blues off tonight, back in action tomorrow in New Jersey against the Devils. We are just about 48 hours away from the NHL Trade Deadline. We'll certainly keep you updated with any news that comes along with that, including earlier today. Looks like Vladimir Tarasenko is going to be headed to the Florida Panthers. So if there's any other news to pass along, we'll certainly do that right here on BK and Ferrario. Coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to dive into some NFL quick hitters. You guys can get involved in the show. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You can always watch us on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. That's where the Graveyard Chat is up and running. Coming up next, Jim Palmer, former Major League Baseball starter, put out a really interesting take yesterday on Twitter about how many starters you need to be ready to go to be a real contender in Major League Baseball. What is the lesson to be learned from last year's playoff teams in that regard? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my dentist, 100 West Dental. If you've been in the market for Invisalign, well, listen up, because 100 West Dental is the option for you. You hear me talk about how they have the most modern technology. It's a brand new office. Patient experience is the most important thing with them. But when I say the most modern technology, they've got a digital scanner for Invisalign that will show you a simulation of what your teeth will look like when you go through it. And this is really cool. A friend of mine had gone and checked this out with Dr. Pryor. They did the digital scanner. He said he's been to a ton of different dentists, but nothing like this one. So if you're in the market for Invisalign, if you want to get those straight white teeth for 2024, then go on out to 100 West Dental and mention my name, Alex Ferrario, and you'll get $1,000 off in an Invisalign package with 100 West Dental. Plus, there's so much more to that preventative procedure. They make sure that you feel comfortable about the dentist and that you know they're taking care of you and your mouth for the long run. You can schedule online. You can even do a consultation with Dr. Pryor before you walk through the doors. 100westdental.com. Get with the best at 100 West.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, it's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So Jim Palmer is an analyst for the Baltimore Orioles at this point. Previously, of course, a fantastic Major League starter in his own right. He tweeted something out yesterday that made me think. He said, if you make the mistake of thinking that your team has enough starting pitching, Major League Baseball teams averaged 13 starters last season. 13 starting pitchers per team on average a year ago. He said there's just never enough anymore. Here in St. Louis, that certainly took center stage yesterday as we got the latest update on Sonny Gray, who's expected to miss at least the beginning of the regular season. And then Mo comes out and is like, we're fine. Everything's going to be all right, guys. We don't need to go out there and add anything from the free agency route. No. We've got internal options that are going to be ready to go for us. Alex, in thinking about this quote, this tweet from Jim Palmer, I was wondering, okay, that's the entirety of Major League Baseball. My assumption would be teams that are really bad are using more starters than teams that are really good, right? Because maybe there were injuries that took place and that's why the team was bad. Or frankly, if your starting pitching stinks, you're going to churn through these guys to try to find something that sticks.
So
Think
the Cardinals.
back to, the 2023 St. Louis Cardinals.
Or the 2024.
So I want to look into the teams that won at least 90 games last year.
Sorry.
How many starters did those teams use on average? And it is true, they use fewer starters than your average. The average team, again, according to Jim Palmer, uses about 13 starting pitchers. The Braves won 90-plus games last year. They used 11 different starters, but that is a little bit misleading. They had 3 guys that started at least 30 games for them.
I was going to say, they had 11 because of injuries that popped up,
Correct.
right? It wasn't because guys were underperforming.
Right, but they did have 3 starters in their rotation that took the mound at least 30 times for them as a starting pitcher last year. The Phillies also had 3 starters that made at least 30 starts for them. They used 7 in total. The Brewers had 2 starters make at least 30 starts for them. They used 8 starters on the season. And then from there, the Dodgers used 11. They did not have a single starter that made at least 25 starts on the season. The Astros used, I still cannot believe that Dodgers team was as good as they were. It's genuinely baffling that happened.
Remember when BK was at the beginning of the season was like, this team's going to be bad.
I was right
They got
about
to the
them.
playoffs and BK was like, I told you. See, they didn't have enough starting
They're not
pitching.
good. They were smoke and mirrors. I still don't understand how they won 100 games last year, but they did.
They had 2 guys named Betts and Freeman that really helped.
100%.
Also, offense does matter.
That
Yeah.
team stunk. They were so bad, and they knew it. They were like, hey, we're going to take a step back. We're going to get Yamamoto and Ohtani in the offseason. Bear with us
And
for
Blake
one
Snell.
season. It's going to be fine. And then they won 100 games. It's amazing. So they had 11 different starters last year. The Astros had 9, but 3 of them made at least 30 starts. The Rangers had 9 starting pitchers, but 4 of them made at least 25 starts for them. The Orioles had 3 guys make 30-plus. They had 8 starters in general. The Rays had 9 starters last year. Only 1 made 30 starts, but 3 of them made 20 or more. Lesson to be learned here. Guys, the teams that are making the playoffs have at least 3 guys that are making 25-plus starts, typically. Do you feel like the Cardinals have that?
No.
Do you feel comfortable that they will have at least 3 starters in their current rotation that will make 25-plus starts this year, preferably 30-plus starts?
No. Originally, at the beginning of the offseason, I did when they signed Sonny Gray, and I'm thinking, okay, you got Sonny Gray, Miles Michaelis will do that, and then we're talking one of Leonard Gibson. But now, seeing with this issue of Sonny Gray, I'm very skeptical. I am skeptical of Leonard Gibson remaining durable for the entirety of the season to give them 25 or more starts. But the other factor into this, too, if I'm looking through this list going off of last season, these teams also had studs at the front end to where you knew you were going to get the 25-plus starts and you were going to get quality starts from them. And I don't know if you can combine those conversations with what the Cardinals have. If Sonny Gray stays healthy, I think he is that guy for you. But beyond that, I don't believe you have the guy that's going to be able to give you those 25 or more starts and keep you in baseball games like all of these teams do.
Yeah, I think you can have, I'm kind of with Alex here, I think you could have 2-3 guys that can make, 28, 30-plus starts. But the only guy that right now I feel like is a difference maker of those guys is Sonny Gray. And like if him getting to 30 starts now is starting to look questionable. Like, he stays healthy and he only misses 2 starts, you're going to be very close to around 30. Otherwise, like, if Michaelis gets there, I don't know what to expect out of Miles Michaelis. If he's more like 2022 Michaelis, okay, now you've got 2 guys that can be at the front of a rotation that you feel pretty good about. But like Lynn and Gibson, if they get to this mark, it's more of just eating innings, and it's not really quality that like a lot of these teams have that we're looking at on this list. So I would be concerned about the pitching depth for the St. Louis Cardinals going into the year, because I'm not sure that even though you might have a couple guys get into that 30 start mark or 28 plus start mark, I think there's 1 for sure, maybe 2 that are like legitimate studs at the front of a rotation.
So as I look through these teams that had players that made at least 30 starts for them regularly, I mean, we're talking about the Braves, the Phillies, the Brewers, the Astros, the Orioles. Those are the teams that really stand out in this regard. The Braves guys that ended up doing it had a 3.8, 3.8, and 3.6 ERA. The Phillies, 3 starters that had 30 or more starts, 4.4, 3.6, 4.4. The Brewers, 3.4, 3.8. The Astros, 3.5, 4.5, and 5.1. And then if you're looking at the Baltimore Orioles, the guys that ended up starting at least 30 games for them, it was a 4.7, 4.1, and a 2.8 ERA. The combination, or the theme on this is all of them had at least one dude that was a stud.
Yeah.
A guy that had innings, that made starts for them, that had the quality. And this is where we get to the Sonny Gray injury. That's who was supposed to be this player for you.
Yeah, let's go back to the Jim Palmer quote. If you ever make the mistake of thinking your team has enough starting pitching, never enough. John Mozeliak, we're encouraged by a tight hamstring from our best pitcher.
And it gets back to our conversation from yesterday. If you're going to formulate it, because like, to answer my own question from the beginning of the segment, do I feel like the Cardinals have at least 3 guys that can make 30 starts? I actually do. I think they're pretty well situated for that. I think you could have 3 of your top 4 starters that make 30-plus starts this year. Maybe we are overestimating the amount of time that Sonny Gray is going to be missing. I don't think we are, but maybe. He makes 30 or more starts, or at least 25 starts this year. Michaelis could certainly be that guy. Lynn and Gibson, you better hope that they're that guy for you, because that's why you signed them.
And you better buckle up for those 25 or more starts.
Sure. I mean, to be fair, like, one of these teams was the Orioles, and one of their pitchers that did start 30 games last year was Kyle Gibson. He did so with a 4.7 ERA, so it's not like the greatest of quality, but he was out there for 33 starts for them last year. That is why he is now a St. Louis Cardinal, is for that value, to extract the innings, to extract going pole to pole in the terms of John Mozeliak. But if you don't have that dude at the front end of your rotation that is making 25 or more starts, you don't fit into the criteria that we're talking about with all of these other teams that were legitimate contenders, 90-plus wins from a year ago. So if it's not going to be Sonny Gray, dude, there is so much pressure right now on Miles Michaelis to return to 2022 form. Because if he does, he is this guy. He is a guy that can have a sub-4 ERA. He can lead a rotation during the regular season. I would not want him leading a rotation in the playoffs. I think that is a fool's gold way to run your rotation, where you don't have a guy with swing and miss at the front end of your rotation. I think that is a losing proposition. But in the regular season, it can work, and we saw it in 2022 how it can work. But man, is that a big bet on a dude that was not good last year. He threw a lot of innings, but that was the only value he had, because when he was out there, he was not very good. He was not himself. They better be right. They better be right. Because when you look at this other nerdy number, Alex, that was posted earlier today from Eno Saris, one of our favorites in the business, he puts together this stat. It's called Stuff Plus, right? Ooh, how good is your stuff on your team?
Oh, man. Another stat I got to pay attention to.
You don't have to. It's just a projection.
I will.
Thanks, buddy.
So he ranks every starter in Major League Baseball on how their stuff comes out, right? You guys all know what this means. And how nasty are you as a starter? Whatever the phrase is that you want to use.
Get nasty.
They found a way to quantify this based on a whole bunch of nerdy stuff that you don't care about.
Spin rate.
That kind of stuff.
Spin rate.
Velocity, spin rate, swing and miss, all this different stuff, right? Sonny Gray's ranks 35th on this list. Pretty good. There is no other starter in the Cardinals' current rotation that is ranked in the top 100 in Stuff Plus. And this is one of those times when the nerdy numbers very much match the watch the game people, where the watch the game people will tell you, like, I don't need to quantify stuff. I know when it's good. And the nerdy numbers guys would tell you, yeah, but I kind of want to quantify it. And this is where they all come together and are like, yeah, the Cardinals need more stuff in their rotation. They don't have it right now. And when you go into opening day with a starter on the mound in Miles Mikolas, who ranks 107th in Stuff Plus, that means on average, every other team in Major League Baseball has at least 3 starters that have better stuff than the guy that you have starting on opening day. It ain't a great place to be, man. It's not a great place to be.
Well, I mean, this goes into Jim Bowden when he was going through the over-unders and the season totals this season, and he laughed at the over-under that was set for the Cardinals, which I think was at like 84, and he's like, yeah, that's not happening. Under, all caps, under 81. That's why.
Yeah.
From the 618 real quick, T-Bone, I want to get your thoughts on this. Guys, I don't understand why you keep beating a dead horse. The season hasn't even started yet, and you're all Debbie Downers. We have no clue what the pitching staff is going to do. Guys,
I do.
We've got a pretty good idea of what the ceiling is for Miles Mikolas, Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, and Steven Matz.
Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson last season gave up the most hits in Major League Baseball. Steven Matz was healthy half of the season. Yeah, I think I know.
Like the reason why is because this is very different than the offense, where you have players like Nolan Gorman and Lars Nootbaar and Brendan Donovan and Jordan Walker and Mason Wynn, who are all young, inexperienced, ascending players. And if you want to dream on that, I'm more than happy to do so. If you were going to have going into the season Zach Thompson, and maybe we're like push ahead a year, you've got a hot tub time machine, you're going to 2025 and bringing them back to 2024, and Tink Hintz is suddenly ready to go to start out the season, and he's in your rotation. Okay, yeah, like this guy would be totally right. We're being Debbie Downers because you have no idea what Tink Hintz is going to be for the Cardinals. Gordon Graceffo, TK Ruby, all these different guys, right? If they were a part of the rotation on opening day, I'd be like, hey, man, at least you can dream a little bit. I'm supposed to do that? I'm supposed to pretend I don't know what Lance Lynn and Miles Mikolas and Kyle Gibson and Steven Matz are going to be? Like, come on, we know what they are.
Just close your eyes.
Yeah, no, don't do that.
And pretend like you're watching Lance Lynn the first time he was wearing the Cardinals on the
that also
front
was,
of his shirt.
That also was a roller coaster. But like, let's call a spade here. What you're doing with the Cardinals and that texter who's calling us Debbie Downers, you're living on hopium of what the future looks like. We're doing the exact same thing with the Blues right now. Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson are Jakub Verana and Kasperi Kapanen, where we were like, yeah, they could be something great for you. And then when the season started, you're like, oh, that's why we were living on hopium.
Hayes.
Kevin Hayes is like your Steven Matz right now. I know what he could be.
I think Kevin Hayes is Kyle Gibson.
Probably.
Like, it's a 1-for-1 comparison of we know who these players are, and it's probably going to be fine if you have them in the right spot.
But you know why we're excited about the Blues? Because of what's coming. The Snuggerudes, the Boldukes, the Dvorskys, all of those pieces. And you're like, yeah, this team's going to look good. Yeah. I'm very excited about what Tink Hintz and TK Roby are going to look like. But that's 2 years from now.
Somebody on the text line really said, did you guys have the Orioles winning the division last year? No, I didn't. You know why they won the division last year? Because Kyle Bradish and Grayson Rodriguez emerged as legitimate front-end starting pitchers. That's why.
Well, Tink Hintz could do that.
Adley Rutschman, who was amazing, and their lineup came together. Like that is why they won their division. But most importantly, Bradish and Rodriguez. Those two starters that are 23 and 26 years old, respectively, became studs. Kyle Bradish was amazing. Yeah. Started 30 games through 170 innings and had a 2.8 ERA. Who is your Kyle Bradish? Who is it?
Tink
if you've got a name that's going to be ready to go within the first month of the season, that's going to finish the year with a 2.8 ERA under the age of 27, sure, I'm more than happy to take your argument.
Liberatore.
Yeah. You believe in that?
A Liberatore.
Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. NFL Quick Hitters here on 101 ESPN.
Tara Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The St. Louis Cardinals are off today in spring training. They'll be back in action tomorrow. And the St. Louis Blues fell to the Islanders yesterday 4-2. They'll be back in action tomorrow when they visit the New Jersey Devils. Well, bringing coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 6. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, let's get to some of these NFL quick hitters and begin with some of the decisions that teams have been making over the last couple of days with the franchise tag. There are going to be 9 players that were tagged on the final day. That includes Michael Pittman Jr., Kyle Duggar, a name that I would assume the casual fan is not super familiar with. He's a safety for the New England Patriots. Antoine Winfield Jr., the safety for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, got the tag. Jalen Johnson, I thought this was a really smart one by the Bears. They decided to tag him. Josh Allen, no, not that Josh Allen. The linebacker Josh Allen, the edge rusher for the Jaguars, he got tagged. And then Justin Matabuke from the Baltimore Ravens. Brian Burns, the man that has been trying to get a contract extension with the Carolina Panthers for like 5 years, it feels like. He got the franchise tag. L'Jarius Sneed, T. Higgins, all end up getting tagged. Guys, I always hate the initial free agency lists because it includes every single one of these players. And then you look at the actual free agent list, you're like, man, this year stinks when it comes to free agency. How much did your excitement level for free agency change based on the players that are going to be tagged?
Oh, it was completely gone. Like, I could care less about free agency now once you see those names come off. And I think, at least for me, the offensive side is what gets you excited. When you see the names of Mike Evans and you see some of the elite names where you're like, damn, that guy could be available, that's going to change everything. Now, there's still some really good names, specifically on the offensive side, running backs, when you're talking about like Saquon.
Running backs, dude. A ton of running backs.
But we all realize that these running backs are 30, 31 years old or have massive injury questions, and they don't know what it's going to be. So, like, now we're talking about
the top 5 free agents on NFL.com, to your point, Alex. Chris Jones, really good player. He could change a franchise. Kirk Cousins, really good player, but, 36 years old. I think he's going to Atlanta. Christian Wilkins, a really good defensive tackle for the Dolphins previously. And then you get to Danielle Hunter, good edge rusher. Tyron Smith, he's played 30 games over the past 4 years, a tackle for the Dallas Cowboys. Saquon Barkley, a running back. Jonathan Greenard, who most fans that are listening right now probably have never heard of him. He was an edge rusher for the Texans. And then Calvin Ridley and Leonard Williams, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Like, starting at 6, it falls off of a cliff compared to what I was anticipating.
And none of these I look at. And look, somebody's going to make a sneaky good sign that you're like, damn, that's going to make them good. But it's going to be one of those that fly under the waiver wire. All of these names do not get me excited for free agency, especially with the NFL when it's all done by the first day.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. It loses a lot of its luster, and it happens every year, it feels like. It feels like every year you end up going, wow, this is going to be a great class. Franchise tag day comes, and you go, oh, yeah, no, this isn't very good. So, and I'll be curious because there's a couple names, like, did you even mention Hollywood Brown? Like, there's a couple names that somebody's going to overpay for somebody, and that's the time where it always gets exciting because it's like, whoa, what just happened there? Like, who was it Jacksonville did? Was it Ridley?
Christian Kirk.
Yeah, Christian Kirk.
When he got that massive contract from the Jaguars, when they signed him.
That's why Tyreek Hill was in Miami.
Exactly.
That's why Devontae Adams ended up in Green Bay, or at least one of the reasons why he ended up in Las Vegas.
And I remember at the time when that was signed, I was like, that guy was like, what, the number 2, number 3 of, where was he, Arizona prior to that? And I was like, whoa, that's an overpay. And he ended up being a fine wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So there will be some of those that happen, but yeah, the luster of free agency is just not really there.
Like, you could go into the middle of the class, like Patrick Queen. Really good linebacker for the Baltimore Ravens. He's probably going to go elsewhere. He's only 25 years old. He could be a stud for somebody else. I liked him in college at LSU. I could see him being a really good
Baltimore.
Player. Marquise Brown, to your point, maybe he can end up kind of regaining that form that he had a few years ago when he was basically a 1,000-yard wide receiver. But otherwise, man, it's just a lot of average. It's just a lot of guys that maybe can help a team. Yeah. When you look at the players that were franchise tagged, do you have one that emerges to you as the most likely to get traded, not named L'Jarius Sneed? Because Sneed, we've heard, is like there's a very decent shot that he ends up getting dealt from the Kansas City Chiefs. I think it's going to take only a second-round pick to get him. Do you have another one that you guys think is likely?
I wonder what Cincinnati does with T. Higgins. Like, it makes sense that they're going to keep him because you want to keep all of those weapons for him.
Sure.
And I think Tyler Boyd's a free agent too, right? So they got to decide what's going on there. But it just doesn't feel like T. Higgins is going to be in Cincinnati. For some reason, it feels like draft day, that gets swapped for something that Cincinnati can use. And frankly, Cincinnati uses the draft to upgrade in certain areas.
The one that I don't think he's going to get traded, but it would make a ton of sense if he did, was Brian Burns. Like, Carolina's not going anywhere. And I know for a fact that the Rams have been all over the Brian Burns chase for the last 2 years. They could get a pretty good haul for Brian Burns because everybody's going to need him on the edge there as an outside linebacker. I think he's the guy that if one of these guys gets traded outside of Snead, he's the one that makes the most sense because Carolina's not going anywhere. And at this point, they need to be just gaining assets.
So another team that I think is worth monitoring this offseason, especially when it comes to the trade market. And I think Jalen Johnson is the one to watch there, by the way. I think they might be the team, the Bears, that ends up trading.
Didn't he request out?
So he wanted a new contract, and they were wishy-washy on if he was going to get it. Obviously, they still are, based on the fact that he got the franchise tag. I think that might be the team that ends up trading for L'Jarius Sneed, and if they do, I could totally see the Bears deciding, you know what, we're going to give L'Jarius Sneed the money that we would have given to Jalen Johnson. We'll trade Jalen Johnson, recoup some of the picks. One team worth watching this offseason when it comes to trades is the LA Chargers. Mary Kay Cabot covers the Cleveland Browns. And last year at this time, she suggested that the Browns should trade for Elijah Moore. And then about a week later, they traded for Elijah Moore. Earlier today, again, this beat writer for the Browns said, or wrote a column on why the Browns should trade for Mike Williams, the wide receiver from the LA Chargers. It's got people wondering online, are the Browns about to trade for Mike Williams? Because last year she did the same thing and boom, it was ready to come out the next week. So Mike Williams is one of the players that the Chargers could save $20 million against the cap by trading. They could also save $23 million by trading Khalil Mack. They could save $23 million if they trade Keenan Allen and $15 million if they were to trade Joey Bosa. Of those four, Mack, Allen, Williams, and Bosa, how many do you think will be traded by the Chargers this offseason, Alex?
2. I think Williams goes and one of Mack or Bosa goes. And my gut would say more Bosa than Mack because Bosa is always hurt for the Chargers. But I do think Mike Williams is going to get traded, especially with them drafting Quentin Johnston, who is not great for them. But it just feels like with Mike, that Mike Williams ship has sailed in terms of believing he can stay healthy and a legitimate number 2 to Keenan Allen. You don't move Keenan Allen, and you got to keep one of those two defensive players. I would keep Mack over Bosa.
Doesn't Allen have injury questions too? Hasn't he been hurt a lot?
Yeah.
He was really good last year.
Last year he was a stud for him.
He was good last year. I would say it's just Williams for me, and I would actually lean on the side of trading Mack just because I think when Bosa's healthy, Bosa is dominant, and I don't see Harbaugh wanting to come in and move away from their best defensive player off the edge. So I would say if I had to take them, I would go Williams definitely, and then I would say maybe Khalil Mack would be the
currently
two.
$30 million over the cap, which is why this is a conversation. They have no money right now to be able to utilize in free agency or to literally do anything. They have to cut a couple of these guys or trade a couple of them.
I wouldn't mind if they even just reset that wide receiver room because Williams and Allen have had injury issues. Now, I get it. Allen was awesome last year, but I feel like every year we go into the season going, wow, look at that tandem in L.A., and at the end of the year, we end up going, oh, hey, look, one of them was hurt, or both of them were hurt, and it ends up costing them.
I do wonder if they say, you know what, let's take our medicine this year, and we'll try to get back to contending in 2025. And they say, we're going to trade Khalil Mack, we're going to trade Mike Williams, we're going to trade Joey Bosa. We need somebody to be a consistent pass catcher, and that could be Keenan Allen once again for them this upcoming season. So we'll keep him, but we're going to trade both of our edge rushers, we're going to trade Mike Williams, try to get some draft capital, restock some of the cupboard here because it's become bare. If they trade Joey Bosa, man, that is the kind of guy that, if healthy, could completely change a franchise. Can you imagine if the Detroit Lions were able to get Joey Bosa? Have him on one side, Aiden Hutchinson on the other. Now we're really talking about a team. The Bears.
And draft a cornerback for the Detroit Lions.
Like the
my
Bears,
God.
Maybe you trade like the number 9 pick to move down to, I think the Chargers, maybe their second-round picks. Like the Chargers trade their second-round pick to get up to number 9 with Joey Bosa. Maybe there's a third-round pick going back, but there's a potential move there as well. I could see Joey Bosa being the type of guy that ends up getting moved this offseason. Coming up next, let's get to questions and answers. 314-399-9646 here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Brandon Kiley to tell you about our friends over at Green Envy. Alex, when I walk outside right now, I'm looking around the neighborhood. I'm like, man, all these people around me have that brown, dead grass. I don't have that problem. My grass is already starting to grow, and it is early March. And the reason why is because Green Envy had me taken care of. They put down the seed in the fall. They've got it taken care of throughout the winter. And now, as we get into the early spring, the fertilizer is in. As the rain starts to come, that grass is going to be growing. They have me taken care with Green Envy.
I'm already getting a ton of grass growing in my backyard, which means I'm going to have to cut it soon. But I love it because it's going to be green. And the best part about it is Green Envy is only using products that are formulated for Missouri soil, so that stuff you buy in the stores, it doesn't work as well because it's not matching up with the Missouri soil, the weather conditions, and everything that goes into it. The other part that I love about Green Envy is when their when their service professionals come out, they leave notes of what they did, and they'll tell you how to maintain that great lawn in terms of the height of you cutting it, making sure you're watering on a daily basis. Check them out. Call them. They're open 12 hours a day, Monday through Friday, Saturday from 9 to 1. Tell them BK and Ferrario sent you. 636-757-1600. 636-757-1600.
Three one four 399 is the Air Comfort Service X line for questions and answers. I would like to start with this, Alex. There's a piece up right now over on the fourth period from our guy David Pagnotta, who wrote the Arizona Coyotes are getting some calls on players with term on their deals. Some of those players include Alex Kerfoot, Nick Bukestad, and Lawson Krause, a man that I have heard Alex bring up on this show no fewer than 27 times over the last few seasons. If you're not familiar with him, I'll let Alex get into the nitty-gritty of his game, but he's 6'4", 220 pounds, and has 3 years remaining after this season on his deal at $4.3 million. Alex, if he is truly available, is this a potential opportunity for the Blues to both buy and sell and get their offseason shopping done early the way that they did last year at the deadline with, Sammy Blais and a couple other guys that they got via waivers?
Absolutely. I mean, this Lawson Krause, you guys hear me talk about Mongoons on the defensive side. This is a Mongoon on the offensive side. And I talked earlier about needing more forecheck and puck possession. That's the 6'4" winger who's third straight year of 20 goals, 20 or more goals, and there's still 20 games left to be played by the Arizona Coyotes. I love this. This would be, though, and I would imagine Arizona, if they're trading this, they want young pieces and they want draft picks. So you're probably talking one of your top prospects and draft picks to get a Lawson Krause. Are you okay with that? I don't know. But if you're going to go down the path of trading Pavel Buchnevich and potentially move Jordan Kyrou in the offseason, this guy matches the time frame of what we're talking about at 26 years old. And frankly, I think this is the exact type of guy that I mentioned, getting a top 6 winger to play with either Robert Thomas or whomever you have in your top 6.
Is there concern about him being a guy that puts up points on a bad team? Good player on a bad team as opposed to a guy that really contributes towards winning?
I don't think so.
I'm only asking because he's only ever played for Arizona, and so I don't know. But
I mean, I get that. I think guys that put up points on bad teams, yeah, sure. Of course, you look at it and you say, like, yeah, but what's he going to do for your team? When you're this big and you're playing on a team where you're still scoring 20 goals, and look, he's not even the best player. I would say he's probably the third best player on the Arizona Coyotes behind Keller and Schmaltz. I not to just stick on the Michael Bunting front, but it's the guy that comes to mind. Bunting was a 20-goal scorer with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he was used in the second line, and he went to Edmonton and became that top-line winger. I'm not saying Lawson Krause is that, but I am saying that what do we talk about with Robert Thomas? Somebody who can shoot, somebody who can go to the front of the net and retrieve pucks. And if you're going to go down the path of a Jake Neighbors as that power forward, why not load up and get another one?
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers from the 314. Guys, if you had to pick 3 Blues players that will be the first ones traded either at the deadline or in the offseason, who would you choose? The 3 most likely players to be moved either at the deadline or this offseason.
Start with Scandella, because I think that's the most likely to be moved, and I think he'll be moved by Friday. I'll put Buchnevich at number 2. And can I just say a defenseman at number 3? Because I don't know who it will be.
I'll say Perunovich.
Yeah. I think it's one of 4 guys. It's Perunovich, Falk, Kruger, Leddy, and that's going to be an offseason move. But that would be my top 3, and then the 4th would be Kyrou, if that happens.
Yeah, I would agree with the top 2 that you had there. I totally agree with Scandella, then Buchnevich. Then I think to me it's either Leddy or Krug would be my third one. And I would say like a sneaky one, because I agree Kyrou is on the outside. I'd throw Saad in there as like a sneaky candidate to potentially be moved.
I can see it.
I think Saad's going to be deadline next year. I think that's going to be the guy that everybody goes after for next year.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. One more question here. Guys, do you feel better now with Sonny Gray being hurt that we have Lynn and Gibson? Or would you still feel better if we didn't have them and instead either signed Montgomery or Snell? So would you feel better right now, given the context of the situation with Sonny Gray's injury, with Lynn plus Gibson or with Monty or Snell?
Monty or Snell.
I agree.
I don't care about Lynn or Gibson, to be honest with you. I'll figure out my innings as I go. I want quality over quantity.
Yeah, I would feel better with just Snell. I wouldn't throw Monty in this conversation because I think he's kind of like Michaelis, where he's a 2, best case scenario. I would say Snell, you still got a stopper in the regular season. In that 5th spot, I guess you'd have 4 and 5 you'd have to figure out, but you can kind of piece that together along the way. But right now, they have 5 arms. They just don't have a guy that's viewed as a stopper.
All right, I lied. One more. Alex, there is another piece of news here from...
God, I love trade deadline day.
I know. From... This is Pagnotta as well, who says the Boston Bruins might be looking to shed some salary as we get closer to the deadline, and Jake DeBrusk is one of those players that could be on the move. Would you be interested in him as the Blues? He's an expiring. This is a little bit of a different situation, but 27 years old, you could extend him.
Yeah, I would be interested in this because I think what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to replenish your offensive forwards next season, and I would like some veterans on this team. I like the way Jake DeBrusk plays. I think Jake DeBrusk is still a guy that, you're probably talking about at best 20 goals. I think last year was kind of an anomaly off of him. But I would much rather have a Jake DeBrusk playing in my top 6 than a Kasperi Kapanen or a Brandon Saad. If he's available, I would try and figure out what they want. I'm not giving up anything of quality for him, though.
Guy that plays on the PK, he can give you consistently like 40 to 50 points per season.
One-time shot, too, by the way.
25-goal scorer, plays on the power play as well, good defensively. Doesn't create a lot for others, but does create for himself and stands at the front of the net, 6 foot, 200 pounds. Feels kind of Jake Neighborsy. Yeah. Honestly, in terms of the way that he plays, the style, everything, I would be all in on this. I think that's a great move for the Blues. They need more middle 6 forwards. Jake DeBrusk fits into that criteria. If you end up trading Pavel Buchnevich at the deadline, acquiring one of DeBrusk or Lawson Krause, if that ends up being the way that they kind of maneuver, I think it makes a ton of sense, man.
Yeah.
Sending something out, bringing in similar salary.
And you're getting something done for the offseason early. Yeah. You're adding that winger that provides offense. And look, you're going to need guys who can play a lot next year if Snuggerud and Bolduc are on this team, because you're not putting those 2 guys in a top 6 role right away.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, Alex is growing a little frustrated with the Blues construct their lineup on a night in, night out basis. We'll ask him why next here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my friends over at Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. You've heard about it plenty of times, but if you're wondering what to do tonight, tomorrow, this weekend, because it's going to start getting warmer again, then you need to go check out Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. It's off of Chippewa. It's open for its 95th season, and to me, this screams spring is officially here. When Ted Drew's is open, it means on the weekends, I'm headed out there with my daughters, my wife, my family. We're going to go out. We're going to sit in the back of our car. We're going to talk and spend time while we eat that delicious frozen custard. And look, it's been a family tradition for so many different people. 4 generations of family have been serving St. Louisans that famous frozen custard, starting those traditions. And it doesn't matter if it's chilly in the evening or hot in the summer. When you're out, you go get Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. And while you're out there, you can check out all the different flavors that they have. I love me some Oreo concrete, but if you're like my wife, you could go after the s'more. You can get the concrete or a sundae. S'more's delicious blend of chocolate, marshmallow, and graham crackers. My daughter loves that one as well. And while you're out there, walk across the parking lot and check out their gift shop. You can shop a unique variety of apparel, souvenirs, gift cards, whatever you'd like. Ted Drew's famous frozen custard off of Chippewa. It really is good, guys and gals.
Once again last night, you watch the game and you say to yourself, man, I'm not seeing a lot of Zach Bolduc, the Blues young player who's on the ice for 10, 11 minutes on average per night since his call up to the NHL club. He ends up with just 13 shifts overall in the game last night. It feels like it's a one game. Kapanen is up with the top line. The next game, he's relegated to only getting, 10, 11, 12 shifts. And last night was one of those games where he finishes the game with 11 minutes overall. Some of that makes sense. It's based on performance. But Alex, you were saying earlier today, you've grown frustrated at times with the way that the Blues are deploying their lineup. Why is that?
I think there's an opportunity to maximize your 5-on-5 potential with the players that you have, and I don't believe Drew Bannister is doing that. And look, I know that Thomas Kyrou and Buchnevich were really good there for a stretch when Bannister took over, and he kept them together, and people were thinking, well, why didn't Berube do this? That's great, but it has disappeared fast for these guys. One game they're on, 3 games they're off, and you're talking about where's the offense with this squad? I'll start with Bolduc. I also get very frustrated with this, and I understand what Bannister is doing. You're protecting him a little bit, but if he's up here, what do we talk about with Victor Scott? If he's up here, don't sit him on the bench. Play him. If you're Zach Bolduc, you have made an emphasis of your defensive game. Why are you skipping shifts, letting him sit on the bench when your team is down by a goal, down by 2 goals? Why is he not on a power play that has been very inconsistent lately when you've got an elite shot like Bolduc does? Sure, he's going to make mistakes, but guess what? My veterans have been making mistakes for the last 2 weeks, and Kasperi Kapanen is playing on a line with Braden Shen and Jake Neighbors. Like, look, I had a lot of hope with Kasperi Kapanen this season, but he's not driving plays. He's not creating offense. He's turning the puck over. You did the same thing with Verona, what you probably should be doing with Kapanen right now. So that's one of my frustrations, where you're skipping over a Bolduc so that you could play more of Kapanen, where, like, if I look at Kapanen in the last 5 games, 11 minutes, 0 shots on goal. 9 minutes, 0 shots on goal. 14 minutes, 0 shots on goal. He's had 1 shot on goal in his last 5 games. To me, that's not a guy in my top 9, let alone in my top 6. But then I look at where the 5-on-5 offense is with Kyrou, Thomas, Buchnevich, and frankly, Neighbors and Braden Shen. Like, the third winger there, however you want to view it. I like Bolduc up there. But we've talked a lot about how you've got guys playing higher up in the lineup that they probably should. I don't know if you have a top line that is consistent. I believe Jake Neighbors is a top line player. And I know Jake Neighbors is 21, and Jake Neighbors, you got to get up there. But I go back to a stretch of November 26th to December 9th. It was 1 game prior to Craig Berube being fired. And what Berube did was, at the time, he was not getting production from his top line consistently. So he dropped Jordan Kyrou down to play with Braden Shen and Brandon Saad, and he moved Jake Neighbors up to play with Pavel Buchnevich and Robert Thomas. And you know what all of those guys did in that stretch? We're talking 8 games. All of them were near point-per-game players. Jordan Kyrou in that stretch playing with Braden Shen. 8 games played, 1 goal, 4 assists. Braden Shen, 2 goals, 3 assists. Jake Neighbors, 5 goals in 8 games. Pavel Buchnevich was the best in 2 goals and 5 assists in 8 games with those players. I am at the point now where, and I know what Drew Bannister's trying to do, and I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe Doug wants to see that top line stay together. But I've officially hit the point where I realize that you don't have a top line. You could have a top line with Jake Neighbors playing with Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich. And it's no coincidence, guys, that Jordan Kyrou scored last night playing with Braden Shen and Brandon Saad. Saad wins puck battles. Kyrou's in front of the net and scores the goal. Yep. Nobody's winning puck battles on that top line with Thomas Buchnevich and Kyrou.
It is one of the things that I think is most confusing to me about this season is why they are so unwilling to change up that top line. I know that those guys probably like playing with each other. You know what they like doing more is winning, I would assume. And I think there's a chance that the best combinations, and for so many years we've talked about this, like, you don't look at lines by threes, right? You look at lines by, hey, give me the pairing, and then we'll figure out the third guy to throw on any given line. And that's the way that you can change up the combinations, either in-game or throughout the season. You figure things out based on, okay, our combination with Kyrou is, let's say it's Buchnevich this year. What do we need around them? What's the best way to get the most out of those 2 players? And we can kind of construct around them based on the game, the matchup, the situation, etc. Well, right now, to me, the best guy with those 2, or even if you want to throw Kyrou as a combination with Thomas. Fine. I don't, at this point, care who it is, but Jake Neighbors makes sense with them. And it's why in our last segment we were talking about, hey, do you go out and add somebody like a Jake DeBrusk who profiles similarly to Jake Neighbors? The truth is this team just doesn't have enough net front presence.
Yeah.
Your second power play unit should not include Oscar Sundqvist, but it has to include Oscar Sundqvist because you can't get anybody else to do the dirty work that Sonny is willing to do. He's always at the front of the net, and he's hoping to get some of those tap-ins. You know who does that? Jake DeBrusk does. You know who else does that? Jake Neighbors does, and that's why he's on that top power play. So it's not as if he has no kind of chemistry with Kyrou, Thomas, Booch, etc. Those guys are all on a power play unit together and have been for, 3 months now?
Yeah.
Like, they know how each other think with the puck in their hand. So I understand. I hear Jamie talking about this on the fast lane, and man, that guy knows more about hockey. He's forgotten more about hockey than I will ever understand. But he talks about how you need players that think similarly about the game. And I actually agree with that. I was one of the ones, Alex, that was telling you a couple of years ago, hey, I don't know that they're getting the most out of Robert Thomas because they don't have players with him that can maximize his skill of being a passing, distributing type of a player. It's like having a great point guard who's a pass-first player, not having any shooters on your roster. That doesn't make any sense. You've got to have guys that can finish when you have a pass-first point guard on your team. But with a guy like Jake Neighbors, if you've got Thomas plus a shooter, which they have right now, no matter the combination that they utilize, you need a guy that's driving to the net to finish. When those pucks end up having rebound opportunities right now, instead of being a rebound opportunity for the Blues, it just becomes an easy exit out of the zone for the other team because there's nobody there. And so it's like, okay, one shot, boom, we're going the other direction again. Make it harder on them. The way to do that is by putting Jake Neighbors up on that top line, getting him more ice time, allowing him to develop even more. He's already become a player that they didn't expect him to be. Let's try to see just how far you can push that. Find out.
Well, and for the statement of, you need guys that think alike, I don't know if Thomas and Kyrou think alike. Because how many times have we seen passes of potential breakouts and they can't receive the pass? And Thomas is a guy that will go in and try and win a puck battle. He wants to play the cycle game. He wants to keep the play alive behind the net and distribute it. Look at how Pavel Buchnevich has scored his last few goals. The play is from behind the net.
Hell, look at Kyrou last night.
Exactly.
He goes to the net.
Standing in front of the net, and Brandon Saad wins that puck battle. But if you're going to say that you need guys that are on the same page and play the same style and think the same way, guys, Kyrou plays perimeter hockey. Kyrou stays to the outside and waits for those passes to get to him. If he's not going in on the battle and you've only got one guy going in, and maybe Pavel Buchnevich, because Pavel Buchnevich is a guy that likes to float and get those shots. Who's winning those puck battles? You know what happens when that takes place, BK? Go back to that Philadelphia Flyers game when Scott Perunovich pinched in to try and keep the play alive and nobody backed him up. You get breakaways and odd man rushes for the other team. So if I'm going to go down the path of, well, I need guys that think the same way as Robert Thomas, guys, Robert Thomas wants to play the cycle game. Robert Thomas wants to get in, win the battles, and distribute the puck from behind the net. And you can't do that skating in from the blue line, skating past a couple of players, taking a shot, missing the net, and coming back the other way.
So I looked this up the other day, to your point on this, of where the Blues are getting their high danger shots from. Who are the players on the team? And high danger, according to the new NHL Edge numbers, you see the commercials for this all the time during the games now. It's basically like their version of Baseball Savant, the StatCast numbers that you can get from Major League Baseball. They're tracking everything. Where are the pucks coming from? When are you in the offensive zone? All these different things. And so for the Blues, the guy that leads the team in high danger shots this year, despite being like 10th on the team in ice time, is Jake Neighbors. He has 52 high danger shots on the season. Second on the team is Booch. Third on the team is Kyrou, and that's because they just have a ton of opportunities. They've got all the ice time. After that, it's Brandon Saad, Alexei Toropchenko, which is amazing. He's barely on the ice, and he's one of the top leaders on the team in
what's that tell you?
High danger
Hard
chances.
work.
Braden Shin is up there, Oscar Sundqvist, and then you get down, and it's like, man, the only other guys that have more than 10 high danger chances are Hayes, Kapanen, and Sammy Blais. So I say all that to say this. The guy that leads your team right now in what we're talking about is Jake Neighbors. If he's already doing that on a line where somebody else profiles to do that, by the way, with a guy like Braden Shin, and give them the opportunities.
Yeah.
Go ahead, see if you can shake this thing up a little bit. Things are clearly not going in the direction that you want them to right now. I will be curious how this looks post-deadline.
That's the part that I think you do have to wonder what it's going to look like, because if you trade a couple players, you force Zach Bolduc into that top spot, you start to give more ice time to a Jake Neighbors. The problem is I don't want Neighbors playing with Thomas and Kyrou.
I wouldn't mind it. I really wouldn't. I would have no problem with that.
Yeah, but I still feel like... I still feel like you don't have three guys on the same wavelength there. I think you've got two guys that are thinking the same way and one that's waiting for something to happen.
Maybe, but I think because Kyrou is so skilled, so talented, you could find a way to make it work. It's a liability defensively, most likely, with those three on the ice together. But the hope is, hey, they're able to keep it in the zone a little bit more often, because now you have two guys that are puck retrievers, at least theoretically speaking, with both Neighbors and Thomas working together. And Neighbors can go in there and win some of those puck battles that you're not seeing right now from a physical perspective from that top line.
One more frustration with the line decisions and the lineup decisions. We need to be done with the Torrey Krug, Justin Falk combo.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it hasn't been as bad. Like, last night was awful. They were a -3, but, like, they went on a stretch there when Falk returned of, not being a minus in games. But, I go back to that stretch where he originally returned from January 26th to February 19th. They had played 8 games together. They were a combined -18. And they're playing 23 minutes a night. This was my frustration with taking Matt Kessel and putting him down in the minors. Krug and Kessel worked well together. You cannot keep deploying these guys for 23, 24 minutes a night when they're a liability on the ice for the team.
So if you look at the way that they've been utilized and just like the underlying numbers, it's probably not as bad as what you'd expect. They were a little better with Kessel and Torrey Krug on the ice than they have been with Falk and Torrey Krug on the ice. But, man, they're just really not very good right now defensively.
They're the same player. Both want to chip in offensively, and they want to get in the rush.
It's frustrating, to say the least. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, T-Bone said, hey, guys, I don't know that we have to lead with Illinois today. But we got to talk about some Illini basketball, because he's all in on this team. He said last night, I'm crying if this team doesn't make it to at least the Elite Eight. So we'll get into that coming up in about 15 minutes or so. But coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You give us 2 scenarios. We'll tell you which one's more likely here on 101 ESPN. According to Frank Saravalli, we do have a trade. The Oilers and the Ducks have come to terms on a deal that will send Adam Henrique's the headliner here to Edmonton. According to Frank Saravalli of the Daily Faceoff, there is salary retention that will be involved, as well as a third-party broker, assuming for salary retention purposes. Some moving parts to this one, but it sounds like Adam Henrique, the center for the Ducks, is heading to Edmonton. Alex, they had been previously rumored to be one of the teams interested in Pavel Buchnevich, so more likely to happen for the Blues at the deadline. They make at least 2 trades, or they make 0 trades.
They make 0 trades. I don't know if you're making 2 trades. The way you make 2 trades is if Buchnevich and Scandella is being moved, and the Buchnevich, I mean, some of the suitors are starting to disappear. The music's going to stop, and there's not going to be any more chairs. I mean, right now you're talking about Carolina. It's probably the only team that still has strong interest in Pavel Buchnevich, but even Pierre LeBrun with his rumblings that he had out yesterday, he didn't even mention Pavel Buchnevich. Yeah. So, and Friedman was just reporting that Carolina, that defenseman that I've mentioned, their prospect, Friedman is saying that Carolina was not going to put him in a package with Vancouver. So if he doesn't get moved, I'm not sure a deal gets done. So I'm going to say it's 0 trades.
Yeah, that's where I am as well. I think it's more likely at this point it's 0, because if they're going to make 2 trades, it's probably Scandella, and then I think the second one probably is Buch. And the way things seem to be trending, it doesn't feel like somebody's going to meet that asking price, so I'll say more likely 0.
I'll say more likely 0 as well. If it's not Buchnevich, like let's say they trade Scandella, who's the most likely other player to be involved in a trade for the Blues, in your mind? So they trade Scandella, boom, that's done, and then Buchnevich is kept. There's not anybody willing to match that price. Who would be next up on your list of most likely?
I would say it'll be a Sammy Blair or an Oscar Sundqvist. I would say one of those 2. Because if you're taking Scandella, even with the 50% salary, there's probably not going to be a lot of wiggle room. Blake can be a 4th-line player, even if we don't believe he's one here. And as much as I don't want to see them trade Oscar Sundqvist, I could see a team being aggressive in the front of saying, get us a 4th-line centerman who can play penalty kill and power play minutes for us. So I would say one of those 2 guys.
I would say Sundqvist. I think he would make the most sense, because somebody could look at him and say it's a 1-year rental. We need someone that's going to upgrade our 4th line. And if you're the Blues, it could also make sense to where if you trade him out, then you free up a spot on the roster for playing time for whether it's Alexandrov, Zach Dean, whoever you want to insert into your lineup. I could see where he's the other guy more likely to be dealt.
All right, boys, more likely to happen. The Blues make their moves in the offseason to move up at the draft, or they make a hockey deal in the offseason.
Hockey deal. I think the Blues are going to make some kind of a hockey deal this offseason. They tried to do it last year. I guess they kind of technically.
Well, they did. It's just, that darn no trade clause. Glad it wasn't a no move.
I think they're going to make a hockey trade. So there was a little, let's say speculation. Bissinger from Spit and Chicklets.
Bissonnette.
Bissinger?
Henry Bissinger. He's a great actor.
Buzz Bissinger, I think, is the name that was coming to mind for me.
Clarence Bissinger, who's a wonderful actor in the 30s.
So he was on the Spit and Chicklets podcast talking to Elliot Friedman. They had him on this week, Alex. And he asked the question, is Braden Shin going to the Oilers?
What? Brady Tkachuk getting traded. Braden Shin, what's going on right now, Chicklets?
So Elliot Friedman, for what it's worth, did say he had heard Shin's name.
Luke Shin.
No, Braden Shin's name in trade rumors earlier this year. The problem was the money. Like they couldn't make it work money-wise. And so they all came to the conclusion of there's no way that the Oilers would be able to make that work. I do wonder if that's something that the Blues consider this offseason. He's got 4 years left on a $6.5 million salary, and there was a report earlier today, Alex, that the Blues would be willing to retain salary for Buchnevich. If the Blues aren't able to make something work with their blue line, I do wonder if that's something they look into as a hockey trade this offseason, where somebody that is close to contending says, Shin makes a lot of sense. We can put him on our 3rd line as a center for us and try to get the most out of him at a $3.2 million salary. In other words, another team does with Shin what the Blues did this year with Kevin Hayes. I could see something like that.
I could see it happening, because honestly, Doug might just blow this thing up if this season goes poorly and start moving everything. I would have so many more guys, though, above Braden Shen on the list of I could see them making move. Like I would have Binnington above Braden Shen of they would trade before.
Really? Oh, I do not.
Yeah, I don't think they move Braden Shen, because I don't know if the Blues feel comfortable with their centers right now, like the depth at center right now. Like if you trade Shen, you're going to be stuck with Kevin Hayes in your top 6. I could see them decide to move.
Get a placeholder.
Maybe.
$1 million, $2 million bucks.
I think there are more guys on this roster that they'll look at and say, we need to move this guy before they would get to Braden Shen.
I don't know, man. If you've got an opportunity to move off of $3.5 million for each of the next 4 seasons, I think it's something you have to consider. And I love Braden Shen. He has been my favorite player on the team since the moment that he arrived here in St. Louis. That dude is everything you could want in a captain and then some. But if we're just being honest about his performance this year has been substandard, and that's been the case due to injuries mostly over the last couple of years as well. If you can move the money, I think it's got to be something that you at least look into.
I think if you move him, that falls into the rebuild conversation also, because that's a massive culture piece to lose.
I totally disagree. I think
it's moving off from a bad contract right now.
Yeah. I think it's about the money, and I do think that I think their locker room is in a better place right now than it was previously.
I think it gets worse if you lose Shen.
We know my stance on the locker room. You need talent, not a leader.
I think you put guys in the locker room in charge in terms of voices being heard that don't deserve to have that, and I think that causes more of a problem, especially with all of these young guys coming in.
Maybe.
I think there's more of a roster turnover that needs to take place before you get there.
I don't know that you'll have an opportunity to move on. The problem is, like, this might be your last chance to move on from Braden Shen, where he's still a player that helps a contending team at the age of 33. Beyond that, I don't know that he's going to be. So you might have to make a decision this offseason of, should we move on from it now, or are we okay with the next 4 years paying $6.5 million to Braden Shen? Because that may be the choice that ends up being in front of the Blues.
I think that falls, for me, and like when the cap continues to move up, like Shen's going to fall into the Bozak conversation to where it's like, yeah, he's third line for you at $6.5 million, but Bozak was playing third line for you at $5 million. There's contracts that I look at, like the Kyrus, like the one of the defensemen, like the Buchneviches, if you do have to go down that path, if the Sods. I think there's more pieces that I look at and you say, this team might be in a better space without that one over a 6.5 with Shen.
All right, T-Bone?
Guys, more likely to happen, and it kind of ties into a lot of the conversation we've had. More likely to happen. In 2025, neither Paul Goldschmidt or Nolan Arenado are St. Louis Cardinals, or in the 24-25 season, neither Kyrou and Buchnevich are St. Louis Blues.
Interesting.
I think it's neither Goldschmidt nor Arenado are playing for the Cardinals. I could see the Blues looking at it and being like, well, we're going to keep Buch because nobody gave us enough money, or nobody gave us enough assets, and we're going to keep Kyrou because Doug Armstrong's going to stick with, well, we feel like he's a part of this future.
Fascinating question.
And it just tells you,
I think if this team goes poorly, Goldschmidt and Arenado are gone before the end of the year.
It just tells you kind of the, I don't know what you'd call it, angst in St. Louis, because there's a chance that, by the way, both of these happen, and you're talking about
Four
two
faces.
teams going into the unknown here in St. Louis, which I can't remember the last time that you could say that about both St. Louis sports teams.
Great song, by the way.
All right, more likely to happen, the Dodgers get eliminated early in the playoffs, or that they win the World Series in 2024. I think it's the more likely they get eliminated. It's really hard, man. Hard to win in the playoffs.
Yeah, sure, but with Yamamoto and Glasnow and Ohtani and Betts and Freeman, I'm going to go, and Nolan Arenado by the trade deadline, I'm going to go down the path of they're winning it.
I would go World Series as of right now, just because, like, we want to talk about pitching depth. You look at the Cardinals, it's like, hey, our 6 starters, like Drew Robb right now. And I look at the Dodgers and I go, it's like Dustin May, or it's Buehler, or it's right now it's probably Kershaw coming back from a shoulder injury. So, like, they are loaded with pitching depth.
More likely to happen, Arenado hits 35-plus homers and 100-plus RBIs, or he wins the Gold Glove this year.
Gold Glove.
I would say Gold Glove as well.
I think 35 and 100.
Did he hit 35 and 22?
Yeah.
Okay. No, he did not. He had 30.
Yeah, I think it's more likely he hits the homers and RBIs. I think this offense is going to be really good again.
Damn. Report Friedman. Philadelphia is working on a trade to send Sean Walker to the Colorado Avalanche.
Damn, that's a good one.
That's going to be that's the equivalent of when they acquired Josh Manson when they won the Cup. Like, everybody is solidifying defense, which goes to the point we've talked about of there are no forwards available. So if you want forwards, it's either Gensel or it's Pavel Buchnevich.
are more likely to happen. The Cardinals learn from their mistakes and after another disappointing season, or they continue this downward trend into the also-rans and only care to compete in the division.
Continue this downward trend because, ladies and gentlemen, the NL Central stinks and we can always make the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm with Alex. They didn't learn their lesson from last year.
And that was the worst they've been in, what, like 40 years?
In fact, they learned the wrong lessons from the Rangers.
What you guys said. So that's
Oh, you're not positive, man?
that's where we're at.
Huh?
All right, coming up next. T-Bone's in love with his Illini again, and he believes they're going to the Elite Eight. Maybe even the Final Four.
Oh, God.
I'll give you my thoughts
Or
on
winning
Mizzou
it
basketball
all.
as well. Coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK. Have you been feeling any of the following symptoms? Fatigue, decreased energy, increased body fat. You got some changes in mood. Maybe you wake up in the morning, you're just not feeling right. Your joints are hurting. You're losing some of that strength that you used to have. All of these are potential symptoms of low testosterone. And over at Victory Men's Health, they are ready to increase your energy, give you more confidence, and increase your drive as well. It is time to unlock your inner champion today by going to Victory Men's Health. They have 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, one in O'Fallon, Illinois, one in O'Fallon, Missouri, and then they have 2 others in Town and Country, and the new location opened up just last month in Sunset Hills, Missouri. For more information on those testosterone treatments that they have available for you, go over to victorymenshealth.com, but they are not only going to offer you testosterone treatments over there, erectile dysfunction, weight loss, any of these services. Maybe you want some vitamin infusions. The red light therapy is something that's really cool that they do. It's all at Victory Men's Health and victorymenshealth.com.
Tara Henderson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals are off for spring training action today. They'll be back in action tomorrow. And the St. Louis Blues fell to the New York Islanders yesterday 4-2. They'll be back in action tomorrow night when they visit the New Jersey Devils. Well, pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 6. The Sports Update is driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
T-Bone's all in on his Illini. This is a good team. 22-8 on the season. Last night gave Purdue everything they could handle. They've done that twice now this season. They're one of the very few teams that's really pushed Purdue like this. And since that Missouri bragging rights game, and yes, that is what I'm going to date this back to, T-Bone, the Illini have been one of the best teams in the country, man. If you look offensively at what they are right now from an efficiency perspective, this is the best team Brad Underwood has had offensive efficiency-wise in his time with the Illini. T-Bone, I'm going to let you cook because last night you sent us a text and said if this team doesn't make the Elite Eight, I'm going to cry because I think this might be Underwood's best chance to do so. Why do you love this team so much?
I love them because it's just the offense that you talk about, because this is the deepest offense that Underwood has had. And you think back to some of the most recent teams, he typically had like two guys that you could go to. You think of that IO team, they had Kofi Coburn, and then the year after it was really just Kofi. And then they had Terrence Shannon last year. Now Shannon's back from his suspension, but it's not just Terrence Shannon. It's Terrence Shannon who serves as kind of a slashing guard, forward, whatever you want to call him. I think he's listed as a guard.
Yeah.
You've got Domask, who's a kind of old school forward, I would say. He reminds me a lot of DeRozan because he likes to play in the mid-range, where he'll back guys down and then take mid-range shots. You've got Coleman Hawkins, who I've publicly said that this is one of my least favorite players to watch. He may be one of my favorite players to watch this year.
He's having a Kobe Brown season this year for you.
He's been unbelievable. And it's not just offensively he's looked better. It's the defensive side of the ball where he's been fantastic. He went up against Zach Edey last night, guarding him for a big majority of that game.
We're finally seeing what they told us he was supposed to be, which is a versatile guy that can defend like 2 through 5s on the other teams.
Yeah.
He's not going to defend a 1, but if you have a guard that's their best player offensively, that slashes especially, he's a guy that can defend that guy. And if you have somebody down in the post that he needs to guard, he can do that as well. So it adds a lot of versatility to what you can do defensively, and most importantly, he's making his threes. Like the biggest change for Coleman Hawkins this year, he went from a 28% three-point shooter to a guy that's shooting at 40%. Boom. Hello, Kobe Brown. That's what you're seeing with Coleman Hawkins.
Exactly. And then you've got Guerrier, who's a really good forward.
I like him, man.
I don't think he's like a elite scorer. I don't think he's really elite at anything, but he's kind of what everybody hopes Carlson would be, which is a player that is good at just about everything. And he had a pretty good first half last night where I think he made, it was 3 threes. He went 3 of 4 in the first half. Didn't really do much in the second half. And then they've got Goody and Harmon that come off the bench that I really like. Danger at times looks okay, but really they've got just really those two guys, Harmon and Goody, that come off of the bench. This is a deep team, and it's not just with the starting 5, but it's with those two guys that can come off the bench and play well for them. This team should get, I think, an Elite Eight run. And if they lose to anybody that is like a 12 seed, like a Loyola Chicago, for example.
Sister Jean, baby.
I don't remember who it was they almost lost to that year with Kofi. I think it was like Chattanooga, someone like that. They lose in the first or second round, guys, I'm going to cry because this team is too deep not to go on a run. And it would be a disappointment for Brad Underwood's squad. They can do everything. Now, defensively, they had been lackluster going into that Purdue game where I think it was 4 of 5 or 5 of 6 where they'd given up 80-plus points. I kind of wonder if they were more checked out.
If they lose in the playoff, or if they lose in the playoffs, if they lose in the tournament, it's because of the defense. The defense isn't good. Like it's really bad. It's a problem for them.
Yeah, it is one concern. But last night was encouraging to see how they played Purdue because I was curious how the defense would look against them. I thought for sure they'd give up 80, 90 points against the Boilermakers. They gave up 77. So I think like they can at times play pretty good defensively. It's not going to be their strength, but if they can just be slightly above average in the tournament, they're going to be a team that should make the Elite Eight, in my opinion.
The problem for them is they don't create any havoc defensively. Like they never turn the opposition over. And when you live that way, it's going to be long, sustained possessions against you, and you've got to D up in a big way. And so they don't stop three-pointers. Teams shoot really well against Illinois this year from 3. and they don't turn you over. That's a hard way to live when you get into the tournament, man, where you're going to even have better ball handlers on a consistent basis than what you see throughout the regular season. And a lot of these mid-majors that you're going to play early on in the tournament, either in the first or second round, guess what? They shoot a lot. That's how they win more often than not, because they're not going to win with size. Those guys are really hard to find, and a lot of them are playing for your Purdue's, Illinois, Ohio States of the world, those big-time Power 5 programs. So you're going to have to stop the three, and you're going to have to force turnovers, two things that Illinois doesn't do. Their offense has to be on every single night in the tournament to be able to go deep. I just don't believe in that as a profile. I would be shorting the Illinois tournament hopes. It's a really fun team, but I remember watching a team that was very similar a year ago to all of the things that I just said about Illinois, but they also got stops defensively with turnovers, and that was Missouri basketball back in 2023. So I think you're watching what I watched last year with Mizzou. Fun as hell. Really exciting to watch throughout the regular season. Your team is probably deeper from a scoring perspective than what Mizzou was last year. Less reliant on any one player than what Missouri was with Kobe Brown. I just don't know that that's ripe for a deep tournament run this year, because there's too many teams that are good defensively and offensively for me to believe it.
And I would say if Underwood can't get this team to the Elite Eight, I don't know if he's going to get a team to the Elite Eight, because this is the best team he's had, and there's a lot of talent coming off of this squad at the end of the year.
Yeah, it will require them to get a nice matchup, which has not happened.
We know that the selection committee does not do them any favors.
So as I was looking up and down at the teams that are going to be involved in this year's NCAA tournament, Alex, I was thinking to myself, how many of these teams have stars that are casual college basketball fans that are listening right now that, hey, maybe it's Saturday afternoon, you got nothing else going on, let's go ahead and watch a game. How many stars would be known by the casual basketball fan? I think it's like 2 or 3.
I fall into the category of the casual basketball fan because, like, I watch a little bit, but during hockey season, it's, my investment obviously is elsewhere. And then once March rolls around and start watching a little bit more, I can name one. I can name Zach Edey and Damask from Illinois, but there's other reasons why.
Are you familiar with him from Duke? The big...
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
The guy that got hurt, either run over or tripped over a player whenever they were...
I know him more for that than his game.
Yeah, that I don't know him like if you said his name, but when you painted the picture of him, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, I know that one. But not like Zach Edey is the guy that I know.
That's the problem with college basketball right now, is that, like, last year was a really good season for star players. Like, Gonzaga had all of these dudes that had been there for so long. Connecticut was building to that team. Like, they had guys that had been there for a couple of years that came back to be able to win that title with that coach. UCLA had, like, emerged 2 years prior to that with all of the dudes that ended up being on the really good team last year, including Jaime Jaquez. Like, that was the crescendo of what was building in college basketball for a number of years. We don't have that this year, man. Like, this year, it's just, it almost feels like a reset, a hard reset.
It felt like what last year was all of those guys graduated, and now you're hoping that all of these guys in March become names that you remember next year.
And Zach Edey just doesn't capture my imagination.
No.
He's big. He's really, really good. He is so incredibly efficient on the inside. I do not like watching Zach Edey play basketball.
He is the prototypical, like, college basketball player that it's like, yeah, cool, but you're going to forget his name after he's done.
Yeah, because he's not going to be an NBA.
He's not an NBA player, no way.
He just can't guard. Like, I saw last night, like, against the Illini, they tried to ISO him out, and outside of Coleman Hawkins was the only guy he could stay with.
And he's more athletic this year than he has been in the past. Like, he dropped some weight, and it is clearly better on the block than he was previously, but he's just not a guy that you're excited about for his future in the NBA. I know this sounds crazy. I think there's more stars in the women's game right now than there are in the men's game.
That's not crazy. I can name 2 girls that play women's basketball right now.
Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, I think, are the biggest college basketball stars, regardless men's or women's, that are playing right now. This was tweeted out yesterday by somebody from Fox Sports. Women's college basketball is now averaging a larger audience than men's on the Fox games. It's about 1 million versus 950,000, so the gap isn't crazy big. Women's college basketball is up 50% this year and 60% across all national networks compared to where it was this time last year. That is all thanks to Caitlin Clark going for this record and being a star in her own right. She's on freaking Allstate commercials, which I don't think I've ever seen for a college basketball player. And Angel Reese and what they're doing with the LSU program as well, pumping out stars there. It's really impressive, and frankly, I don't think I've ever said this before. I'm more interested in the women's tournament this year than I am the men's. I'll be watching the men's, don't get me wrong, because it's March, and like I'll be betting on the games, and we'll be out in Illinois having a great time. But the women's tournament, in terms of the teams that are going to go deep, that's the one that I'm more curious about. And I've never in my life said that before prior to this upcoming tournament.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'll be brutally honest with this. I don't watch a lot of women's basketball. It doesn't get me excited. This year is the first year that I've really gotten excited about it because of Caitlin Clark. And I think that possibility of Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese and talking about that gets you more excited than anything with the March Madness tournament.
Yeah, and I think what makes it even more exciting from the women's side is think back to, like, what was it, a year ago, 2 years ago? Leah Boston was the big for South Carolina. It always felt like South Carolina, though, was destined to get to the championship, right? That team was always known as being the best. They had the star player. What do you think on the women's side of not only is Caitlin Clark and Angela Reese, I would agree, two stars that are more probably known to the common fan than anybody on the men's side? Caitlin Clark's going to have a tough path to get to the championship. You know, that Iowa squad, they're good, but they're not going to be a team that I think is going to be favored to go to the championship game like that Aaliyah Boston, South Carolina squad had been. When you think back to some of those UConn teams that had all those great players, they were always teams that were viewed as, oh, they're locks to get to the championship, and then do they win it? Iowa's going to have a lot tougher path with Caitlin Clark, and that's what's going to be so interesting because if they win a championship or they get to the Final Four or get to the championship game, it's just going to build the story of Caitlin Clark.
My hope is we get a South Carolina, Iowa, USC, and LSU Final Four in the women's game. Yep. If we get that, the ratings for that will be bigger, I genuinely believe, than the ratings for the Final Four for the men's side, because there are so many stars that would be a part of that. South Carolina is the best team in the country this year. They have not lost a game yet. Iowa has Caitlin Clark, USC has Juju Watkins, and LSU has Angel Reese. Like, the star caliber of players that will be a part of the women's game and that potential Final Four will be bigger than anything that the men's game can offer this year. And that includes your Illini. Coming up next, the Junk Drawer here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Let's dive into the juncture. Guys, people get real mad when you talk women's basketball, by the way.
Why?
I had no idea that it enraged folks the way that apparently it does, both on our text line and over on YouTube. You guys are toxic.
What happened?
Legit toxic with some of the comments that are coming our way for saying women's college basketball is having a moment right now compared to the men's game. I'm not even reading some of these. Just know y'all, we see them. All right, well, let's dive into the juncture. Alex,
No, y'all,
last
we
night,
don't care.
This is why I closed it down right now.
I had a genuinely amazing evening. I went to the movie theater. It's the first time I've been in a long time. I went to see Dune 2, and I wanted to experience it in theaters. I know you're a guy that used to go to the movies all the time. Mm-hmm. There are very few movies nowadays that come out that I say to myself, I need to see this in a theater. Top Gun 2 was the last one that I felt that way about, where I was like, you know what? To get the full experience, I want to see this in a movie theater where I've got the full surround sound going, this massive screen in front of me, and I'm lounging back in the new chairs they've got, right?
I can confirm. I recently just rewatched it. Not the same.
Yeah, it's different. It's different when you're not in a theater. Dune 2, go see it. Go see it in a theater. This is the best experience that I have had in a movie theater that I can remember outside of Top Gun in like the last decade. Like Black Panther was one of those movies I was like, I got to see this in a theater. Top Gun 2, one of those movies. Dune 2 belongs in that. It is an unbelievable experience. And guys, Marvel has gone so off the rails at this point with how many movies we have from it and just honestly some of the storytelling. I think Dune is the biggest franchise that we now have available to us. I can't think of anything else that fits into this criteria, and they're going to do 3 of them. It sounds like the wait for the next one might be a little bit longer because there's like a time lapse that takes place. I'm not giving you any spoilers, I promise. Within the franchise based upon the book, the number of stars that are a part of this movie, the storytelling in it, the viewing experience of it, the sound, it was like the biggest feel of a movie that I can remember. It was amazing.
This feels a lot like, and I haven't seen or read any Dune, so I don't know anything about it. But this feels an awful lot like the success that Harry Potter had, to where, like, at the time, for Harry Potter fans, because I was in the early stages of it, you had to see that in theaters. Well, frankly, there wasn't any other way to see it because it was, coming out on VHS otherwise.
What?
But, like, as it got bigger and more movies came out, like, it was a appointment to go out to the movies to see that film. And this, at least, I know nothing about this, but other than the Marvel series, and I think that's taken a massive blow compared to where it was, this is the biggest thing right now in terms of movies.
Did you feel this way about in the moment, where it was like, man, this is going to be huge?
Well, mine was Rocky. Anytime Rocky movies came out, like when they came out with that Rocky Balboa when he was like 60 and you're like, what the hell's happening? And then all of the Apollos, I got way too excited for that.
And it was a trilogy, probably when Christian Bale and why am I drawing a blank on the director?
Batman.
Yeah, Batman.
Christopher Nolan. Yeah.
Well, those 3, I would say probably there, but you probably didn't get that more till the 3rd one because
Dark Knight I was pumped for. Like Dark Knight, I waited in line to go see.
I don't remember Batman Begins, so that's why I don't remember how that kind of phase was from 1 to 2.
Somebody mentioned Avatar. Avatar was big, but it was different.
And it had a huge gap between.
Yeah, that was different. And it was like you said, it was a one-off where it was just like, hey, this is this huge film that they've spent a ton of time on, a crazy amount of money on. So it was more of an experience and like a cinematic thing than it was.
Yeah.
This is going to be a franchise that takes over everything. Dune is like Star Wars in that way, where it's going to be everywhere, man. And this is one of many stories that are a part of the series of the 1960 novel. Like, there's going to be a bunch of these. Lord of the Rings, somebody brings up. I think there was a cult following with that. Obviously, a huge story.
Yeah.
Indiana Jones, kind of like that, although that felt like Transformers. Transformers felt like it was at that peak level, those first 3 movies where it was like, when it was
Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah, when you didn't see it, you were the loser of the group.
Text line say Lord of the Rings is probably the closest thing.
I'd agree with that. I haven't watched it. But
at what point did
so.
you feel like Fast and the Furious became this massive franchise? Because now it's like one of the biggest franchises that we've got.
Yeah, I would say probably by the time The Rock joined the Fast and Furious conversation, which I think was either the 4th or the 5th one, when The Rock joined it, that's when you're like, this is a huge deal. It's like when you get that big movie star into it, because for the longest time it was Paul Walker, it was Vin Diesel. You had like Ludacris in there, and you were like, yeah, this is good. But when The Rock joined it, it's like, damn, Fast and Furious is now taken off.
Should you put Mission Impossible into that? I feel like that's always a must-see when you see it, when Tom Cruise is back doing it.
It's funny, that was well before your time, though.
I know, but I just watched the recent one. I watched the newest one like maybe a couple weeks ago.
One of the other things that I really love about this particular franchise is the people that they have as a part of it in terms of the actors. Like, Timothée Chalamet is one of the biggest actors in the world right now. He's also incredibly young, and there's a big gap in Hollywood that exists right now between like the previous movie stars that you would throw into an action film and the new up-and-coming stars. I didn't feel like we really necessarily had those people. Like, Austin Butler, I thought was pretty good in this.
Oh, I loved Austin Butler in the Elvis movie.
No, he did basically just reuse his uncle in the film. He kind of reused his voice. I thought some of what's been written about his performance has been overstated a bit. I thought he was really good. I didn't think it was...
I'm watching Masters of the Air, which is like a Band of Brothers type of show, and he sounds just like Elvis. I keep going,
I know.
You shouldn't be Elvis Presley right now.
Well, that's what's his face that was in Bohemian Rhapsody, Rami Malek. I mean, I don't see anything other than Freddie Mercury every time I see him in something.
With like the Marvel movies, the guys that women that become somebody that is a superhero.
Chris
in a
Evans
Marvel
is
movie,
Captain America in my mind, no matter what.
Right, like Hemsworth is just always going to be Thor, no matter what role he plays in. He's in the new Mad Max movie. He's just going to be Thor that's playing in a Mad Max movie. I don't
understand why actors are like, I would love to be referenced as Thor for the rest of my life. Reference me as Thor for the rest. Call me Iron Man for the rest of my life. I'm good.
And the funny thing about the Marvel Universe, because you're right, like a lot of the names that are in this and Dune are already kind of big names. You do have younger, up-and-coming ones like Timothée Chalamet. But like, what do you think of Marvel? Did I say that wrong?
Chalamet.
I have no idea.
That's like, what's her face?
When you think of Marvel, like Robert Downey Jr., kind of was a name, but he wasn't a star when he joined Marvel. Chris Evans, the same way. I'm trying to think who the biggest star was at the very beginning of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like,
Downey Jr. was the biggest name.
I mean, it would have been one of the Spider-Man movies. I guess it would have been the way that you would have looked at it. That's like prior to it becoming what it is now.
Yeah, and Spider-Man wasn't even a part of the Marvel.
Yeah. Spider-Man would have been.
That wasn't even Marvel at the time. I mean, it was, but like Spider-Man was its own entity. It wasn't even a part of that Marvel universe.
Before the Avengers became.
Yeah, Iron Man was the first one that started that off.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is like Robert Downey Jr. like had to have a rebound.
Yeah,
like that was his rebound, and then now we look at him as a star. Yeah.
He's Alex. That's
everybody goes through it.
Coming up next, we got to talk about what's going down in the NHL right now. The deadline's going nuts. We'll talk about it here on 101 ESPN. With Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley to tell you about our friends over at Circa Sports Illinois. This is the way that sports betting was supposed to be. Anytime that I'm placing a bet, I try to shop around at a bunch of different markets to see, okay, where am I going to get the best bang for my buck on this bet? And when you're betting, especially moneyline parlays, the way that Alex does a lot of the time, you're going to want the best bang for your buck in that regard, and that is over on the Circa Sportsbook. We are just around the corner from the big tournament that's going to be taking place a couple of weeks from now. When we're over in the Illinois side of the state line, Alex, we're definitely going to be betting on the Circa Sportsbook.
I love it because I know that they're not keeping all of the money. They're trying to keep as little money as possible on those big bets, and the tournament is where all those big bets come out for yours truly. They've got the tight money line splits. They have the high app limits that BK was talking about, and I love the full transparency that Circa Sportsbook plays with because they tell you to check out other sports betting apps because they're confident you're going to come back because of those high app limits and tight money line splits. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
All right, there's a big move that just took place in the NHL. It's the kind of move that you don't see at this time of the year very
hockey
often,
trade.
Alex. It's a legit hockey trade with young players going to each different side. Young players that could become stars in the NHL. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. So, Alex, there is a move that has taken place between Buffalo and Colorado. Colorado is trading for Casey Mittelstadt, a guy that you brought up in your Ferrario 5 a couple of weeks ago as a potential, I guess, kind of a buy low candidate coming over from the Buffalo Sabres. He could fit into your top 6 as a centerman. He's 25 years old. He instead will be going to Colorado. And in return, they are sending Bowen Byram, who's had a tough year this year for Colorado. They are truly, Buffalo is buying low on him. He's a 6'1", 190-pound defenseman, still very young at just 22 years old, former top 5 pick. Alex, what do you make of this kind of a deal going down? Buffalo and Colorado. This is the most interesting, in my opinion, deal that's been made so far.
I mean, Colorado just navigated what I believe is the best trade deadline, and it's going to be hard for somebody to top. They not only acquired a defenseman who on any other team would be playing in their top 4, and Sean Walker, who was acquired from Philadelphia, comes over and is their third pairing defenseman. So, I mean, now you've got 6 guys that all can eat 20 minutes a night, including one of the best defensemen in the game in Cale Makar. And then you flip a defenseman who maybe has fallen out of grace with Colorado, has not lived up to the 4th overall pick potential, and you traded him to get a second-line center. I mean, they also were able to trade away Ryan Johansson's $4 million next season to Philadelphia. Philadelphia ate all of it. It costed you a first-round draft pick, but you got that player off the board, and that was the one that the speculation was he was the problem in Colorado, why they were struggling. And you brought in a 25-year-old centerman who's playing third-line center for the Buffalo Sabres and moves up every once in a while, but he's 25 years old. I'm not sure what Buffalo's doing there because if I'm Buffalo, I don't need defense. I need goaltending. And if I'm going to trade that player, I'd be trying to go after a young goalie. But they've got one of the best defensive cores to build around now with Owen Power, Rasmus Dahlin, and Bo Byram. But, man, Colorado just built another juggernaut because now you've got 4 lines that are scary good. I mean, Casey Mittelstadt is going to be playing on the second line with them, and you could get Gabe Landeskog back in the postseason for Colorado, and you just locked down your top 6 defense, although I still believe Colorado's goaltending is for lack of a better word, ass. So, but you built an awesome team in front of them, which is how they won the Stanley Cup in front of Darcy Kemper.
I love the way that Colorado and Vegas operate. I love it, man.
They know they got a window, and the window is wide open when you got McKinnon and Rantanen.
And they have a lot of assets that are in play every single year at the trade deadline. It's got to be so much fun to watch. And now, credit where it's due. Like, Doug Armstrong is unafraid to make moves when necessary as well. When he believes his team has a chance to win, we've seen it. He'll go out and make a move, even that maybe he's overpaying relative to what other people think. But, man, right now, I'm not sure anybody is throwing the kind of assets at the deadline that both Vegas and Colorado are on a year-in, year-out basis. It's almost like those two teams are having an arms race against one another, and it's happening again this year. Like, I think Jake Guentzel has a real chance to be a Vegas Golden Knight by the end of the week.
I agree.
And I think a deal like this could be exactly what it takes to incentivize Vegas to go make that kind of a deal, because they're looking at Colorado being like, man, they just improved a lot. We've got to do the exact same thing now.
Real quick, for people that I know have talked about, trading off of contracts for the Blues and getting rid of them, Johansson had one more year at $4 million on his contract, and the Avalanche traded a first-round draft pick in 2025. That is a conditional pick. It's a top 10 protected pick, but it cost them a first-round pick to trade off of a 1 year left on his contract at $4 million player.
I mean, they got Sean Walker.
Yeah, I understand that. But you got Sean Walker, but you also had to eat a contract for 4 years. I'm just painting this picture of, like, for people that want to trade away $4 million or $6.5 million, there's going to have to be something attached to it.
Probably. But, I mean, what would Sean Walker have cost in a trade in general?
Probably
second?
Maybe a second-round pick.
So you're giving up the equivalent of another second-round pick to move off of the Ryan Johansson contract.
Yeah.
Makes sense. That's what it costs to eat salary with retention anyway. So, yeah, no matter what.
I'm just making it clear to people, like, it's not just trade somebody away and get rid of them. It's going to cost you a first or a second-round pick, probably a first-round pick if somebody's going to be willing to eat 3 years of $4 or $6.5 million.
Maybe. The other problem, though, like, Ryan Johansson isn't a small salary. He's $8 million.
But it's only 1 year.
for $8 million. that's a huge salary to just go ahead and take right now. Boom, we're gonna go. Yeah, because they didn't even retain him. Like Ryan Johansson is getting cut.
Yeah, no, they're waiving.
He's getting waived immediately. So if you were to send a salary elsewhere of a contract that maybe isn't great to another team, but they're willing to keep them because they're still an NHL player and it's not $8 million, I don't think it's going to cost that much. I think you're talking salary retention seems to be a second-round pick for like the top salaries right now.
I think it's going to cost a first-round pick if you're talking about these massive salaries on your team.
Though?
Falk, Krug, Sod.
I don't
Letty,
think so.
I think it's going to cost.
It wasn't going to cost that last year on Krug, and Krug's had a better year now than he did.
But you were also getting Sanheim in the deal, and I think you were eating one of their contracts, if I remember correctly. You were eating one of theirs.
The deal that you were eating was the deal
Sanheim.
that you got.
Yeah, I thought we were supposed to like Hayes was kind of the throw-in.
That was
and you were offsetting the salaries because they got rid of the $6.5 million, and you took on $6.5.
They've got to find a way to match money with somebody else on a contract that they're not super thrilled with.
Right.
So I don't think it's going to cost as much to retain salary from somebody else. Ryan Johansson they wanted to get off of that money as quickly as humanly possible, and they finally found a team that was willing to take it. But again, Sean Walker was one of the. I think what we saw today, Alex, this would be my takeaway from the two moves that Colorado made. Defensemen are in such incredibly high demand that I actually am not sure that the Blues would have to take on as much salary as we think. Like, every team in the NHL is looking for top four defensemen right now.
Yeah.
Sean Walker's a good one, don't get me wrong.
I'm not sure you have a top four defenseman other than Nick Letty that other teams would view as a top four defenseman.
But if, I wouldn't do this. I want to say this up front. I think you could probably get more for Parayko right now than you could for Pavel Buchnevich. Because there's
I would agree with
much need for defensemen, especially on the right side, across the NHL.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that, but I don't think you should do it.
I don't either, but seeing some of these moves, like if you could get somebody that is Casey Middlestat plus.
I mean, you could get
that?
I mean, if you want to, I wouldn't want more than Casey Middlestat. If you want to call this a rebuild, I mean, you could get even more for Parayko or Buchnevich with Jordan Binnington. I'm not talking about doing it. I'm just pointing it out that for how crazy the deadline already seems to be, which makes sense now when I heard Barry Trotz say yesterday that the prices are insane. I mean,
I don't agree with him, though. What we've seen so far for forwards has not been high at all. I think the pricing has been more than reasonable for the forwards that have left. The defensemen, it's really high.
Defensemen, I've been surprised by. I mean, this move by Colorado to do this deal was, I mean, I can understand why teams were looking at Sean Walker like, yeah, we're not going to pull this one off. And then, of course, with the Casey Middlestat and Bo Byram. But now I'm wondering what those prices look like for a Buchnevich or a Jake Gensel, because for how much this has been today, it gets crazier when you talk with those names.
It also speaks to the forwards that were available. Like, we've been saying this for a while, Alex.
I mean, Adam Henrique got a first-round pick.
I think sometimes the media kind of hypes up, understandably so, the deadline because it's the only action that you get around this time of the year. But the truth is, most of these players that are getting traded forward-wise aren't going to change the fortunes for the teams that they're going to. Like, they're really nice, solid, complementary pieces. The only two forwards that really have the ability to change and seriously impact a playoff race for somebody are Jake Gensel and Pavel Buchnevich. Those are the two. And if you don't acquire one of those two, I wouldn't be selling the farm either if I'm one of the general managers across the NHL. Like, if the Blues were in a situation this year where they needed a top six forward, I would say don't go get one unless you're getting Jake Gensel, because nobody else is going to change your life in a meaningful way to where it's worth giving up a potential first-round pick for that player.
Yeah.
He's Alex Ferrario, that's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, coming up in about 15 minutes. But next, we continue our countdown of the 20 most important Cardinals for the upcoming season with number 17 on our list. I think the downside here is pretty significant. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my insurance agent, Tracy Bibb. Her and her team are the best, have been taking care of me and my family for about 3 years now when it comes to our home and auto insurance. And now that we're going to have our third kid in August, that means I'm about to invest in the minivan life. And when it comes to car insurance, I want to make sure I'm getting the right price, I'm getting the right vehicle, my insurance isn't going to skyrocket. These are all conversations that I have with Tracy Bibb because she's brutally upfront with everything. She gives you the honest answer, and she's keeping you in the loop of everything. When prices go up, when your home insurance goes up, when your auto insurance goes up, she's telling you all about it. The customer service is at the best with Tracy Bibb. Give her a call today. Tell her Alex Ferrario sent you and ask for a free non-committal quote. She'll walk you through everything, the whole process. She'll even cancel your insurance agent for you. You don't even have to do any of that legwork. Give her a call, 314-328-4260, 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb.
The 20 most important Cardinals for the 2024 season.
Number 17, Giovanny Gallegos.
Sharply hit short. Long throw. And in time, Gallegos got it done. And we head to the stretch.
All right, let's continue with our countdown of the 20 most important Cardinals for the 2024 season. At number 17 on our list is Giovanny Gallegos, the man that at one point last year was considered to be the closer for the Cardinals. Over the last 4 or 5 years has been one of the most consistent relievers in baseball. But last year was a little bit of a down year, Alex. People were hitting him harder than he had previously. I remember early on in the season, I went to the Cardinals versus the Angels game, and that was the game where the Cardinals just blew it late in that one, and it was Giovanny Gallegos that got shellacked. That was the moment when I probably should have known, this is not going to go the way that any of us expected it to. What is your best case scenario, Alex, for Giovanny Gallegos in 2024?
That he looks like your second best option as a closer with Ryan Helsley. That you are seriously having conversations in the 8th, 9th inning of, hey, how do we deploy these guys? Because, yeah, Ryan Helsley is great, but look at how Giovanny Gallegos is pitching. If you've got two guys that you not only trust, but you basically have zero concerns about this game ending in a one-run lead, that's the best case scenario, knowing that I've got two weapons to go to at any point of the season. And Giovanny Gallegos has the ability to provide that to Ali Marmol.
Yeah, I think the best case scenario is last year was just a blip on the radar. And because looking at his numbers from 2019 to 2022, those 4 seasons averaged 73 innings pitched and a 2.84 ERA.
Yeah.
Like, he is one of the best relievers, the most reliable relievers in all of baseball. And I hope, and the Cardinals are hoping too, that was just a blip on the radar in 2023 and everything kind of equals out and he's back to his normal self.
So last year, when you look at the numbers for Gio, one of the problems was just how hard his fastball got hit, man. He was not the same. He did not have the same stuff fastball-wise. A little bit of that was due to velo, but generally speaking, I think and I think that the Cardinals have more or less admitted as much, I think he was tipping pitches last year for a majority of the season.
Well, don't do that.
Yeah, it's probably not a good way to go about it.
Doing, Gio?
I do wonder if some of that developed because of the pitch clock. I wonder if he tried to change the way that he went about things, and in doing so, he was giving a tell to the opposing team. I think that is part of why they expanded their coaching staff this year to be quicker at finding those things and seeing them, adjusting them accordingly. And it just took a while with Gio last year because they only had one guy that was in charge of their pitching department. He was stretched way too thin, and he probably wasn't able to see some of the stuff that was taking place during the game. So the downside this year is that it all continues. And it wasn't a tip. It was, hey, stuff's diminished. He doesn't have the same shape, velocity with his fastball. And now he's just a guy that's going to give up a bunch of home runs. And that happens sometimes with relievers. It just goes, and they're never the same. Maybe 5 years from now, he reemerges with somebody. It's like, whoa, Giovanny Gallegos has this new weird pitch. He's working on this different slider, and he's come in and he's striking out 30% of the batters that he's facing. That's possible. And if that happens, I do believe that the Cardinals are actually better situated, and it's why he's this low on our list, because previously he would have been higher. The worst case scenario for him is that he's just the same dude that he was last year, and he's probably a 6th inning pitcher for you. And now, because you have JoJo, because you have Keenan Middleton, because you have Andrew Kittredge, because you have Riley O'Brien, who I'm super excited about, I actually think you could overcome a bad year by Gio in a way that previously, if he was that player, dude, the Cardinals would have been in a bad place with their bullpen.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you there, because that's why I thought all offseason, like when we did the what are the needs for the Cardinals in the offseason, 2 high leverage arms were on my list, because bullpen arms, I know like the Cardinals, for example, will look at like Michaelis and say, well, he can get back to being a number 2. Last year was just an off year. Same with Nolan Arenado. He can get back to being Nolan Arenado. With bullpen arms, you shouldn't play that game. With that, it is always so short-sighted with bullpen arms because they break so easily. So that's why I thought they needed to add 2 big-end, back-end bullpen arms, and they did that this offseason. And that's why I think you're 100% right. Like, worst-case scenario, Gio's just kind of sitting in the middle of the Cardinals' bullpen, and you get good outings, you get bad outings, but you don't have to rely on him to be the setup man, or honestly the guy that closes games, knowing how Ollie likes to use Ryan Helsley.
Alex, you had Gio the highest on your list. You had him at 15. I had him at 17. T-Bone had him at 19, and overall it ended up averaging out to be 17th on our show's list of the 20 most important players. Why did you have him a little bit higher in your mind?
Because I believe you are going to need desperately this bullpen this season. I believe that you are going to have a lot of games this year in the 5th or 6th inning talking about locking things down. And if you don't have Giovanny Gallegos, I've got one guy that I trust right now. Now, that opinion could change by May after I see more of Kittredge and Middleton, and maybe this Riley O'Brien comes onto the scene. But going into the season, and JoJo Romero was our yesterday, and I think I had him higher up than both of you guys as well. I view this as you're going to need a lot of guys to get you through the season in the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th inning because of Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, Steven Matz, and the lack of depth.
T-Bone actually had JoJo the highest. He had JoJo ahead on his list of Giovanny Gallegos, interestingly enough.
Yeah. So I think you and I are, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you and I are on the same page. This bullpen is not going to just be useful. It is going to have to be a weapon for this Cardinals team to be good.
I think when we did this list, I think when I'm doing it, I'm thinking, okay, importance of regular season and postseason.
Sure.
If you just did a 20 most important Cardinals right now, projecting them to be in the playoffs, 5 bullpen arms are going to be a lot higher on the list, because the way they're going to win in the playoffs, the way they're currently constructed, is going to be bullpen games. It is going to be, okay, Matz or Gibson or Lynn goes like 4 innings, 5 innings, and then we shorten it and turn things over to our bullpen. So that's why I think I had most of the back-end bullpen arms on my list, if I remember correctly. I think I had Middleton, maybe.
You did not have Kittredge. You did have Middleton. You had Gio, and you had...
Did I have all of them on there?
JoJo as well.
Did I have Middleton, JoJo, Kittredge?
Alex had Giovanny Gallegos at 15. He had Kittredge at 19. JoJo at 18. You did not have Keenan Middleton on your list, though.
And then obviously Helsley's higher up for us. So, yeah, I mean, I had four back-end arms, which just goes to what I just told you. 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th inning, you were going to be relying heavily on these guys.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Tomorrow, we will continue our countdown of the 20 most important players with number 16 on our list, a player that will not be playing every day, but will have a vital role for the team. We'll tell you who that is tomorrow. Coming up next, we're talking to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues. We'll get his reaction to some of the moves that have already happened in the NHL prior to the deadline and ask him what he thinks the Blues are going to do next year on 101 ESPN.
Tara Henderson here with a SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Cardinals are off for spring training action today. They'll be back in action tomorrow. And the St. Louis Blues lost last night to the Islanders 4-2. They'll be back in action tomorrow as well as they visit the New Jersey Devils. Well, pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 6. The Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, we're in the search of Chris Kerber. Nobody can find him right now. So Chris Kerber might be joining us on Friday. If he does, we'll get
us on Friday.
Friday edition, a trade deadline edition of Chris Kerber, which honestly, what more could you ask for here on BK and Ferrario? But we do want to talk a little bit about the NHL trade deadline. And Alex, you were telling me yesterday, my hypothesis all along of, hey, the Hurricanes might be the spot for the Buchnevich deal. You're actually starting to come to my side of the aisle here. Why is that?
You hear that, T-Bone? He's pumping his own tires right now. So I was listening to the Jeff.
When I'm right, I got to be able to pump those tires.
They don't happen very
often.
I was listening to the Jeff Merrick Show podcast. Obviously, I'm a little obsessed with Jeff Merrick. I love that guy. But he had Thomas Hickey on, who was a former NHL defenseman, played with the New York Islanders, and they were talking just about the trade deadline. He was talking about, Matt Barzal and the New York Islanders. But they got into the discussion of teams at the trade deadline. And Hickey went into an explanation of how he believes the Carolina Hurricanes need to go all in. And he said, look, you've got a window right now where you have to win a Stanley Cup. You have a ton of pending RFAs and UFAs. You don't know if you're going to be able to keep this same consistent and dangerous roster in place. You've got the goaltending right now. Defensively, you're good. You've got the right head coach. You got to go for it. And Merrick pushed back and said the problem is Carolina's coach does not want to give up players with term. He doesn't want to give up his assets for one guy for one season. And Hickey said, you know what? Merrick said he doesn't like to pay the price. And Hickey responded with, you know what is expensive? Winning a Stanley Cup. And he said the player that Carolina should target is Pavel Buchnevich because you're getting him for 2 cup runs. You have an opportunity to put that guy in a top-line role with the roster already in place and go win a Stanley Cup. And the more that I've thought about it, I thought Edmonton fell into this category. Obviously, they weren't willing to pay the price of what Doug Armstrong set. Now that we've heard Saravalli reference that the Blues would be willing to eat some of the salary. I know Elliot Friedman said on the Jeff Merrick Show today that, their best defenseman prospect that I've brought up, they're not willing to trade. That's for rentals. If you're trading Carolina for a guy with term who you might eat to this year and next year's salary at 50%, this is the move that would be the opportunity for the Blues to reset this retool and expedite it. Because if you do get a Martin Necas back, if you do get a first-round draft pick, and if you get this defensive prospect from them, you are filling 3 different holes for this Blues team in terms of top 6 forward, potential top defenseman, and an asset at this offseason to either move up in the draft or make another hockey trade to bring in the right player. So Carolina not making a move right now tells me they're going heavy after either Gensel or Buchnevich. And if they don't get Gensel, which if you're a Blues fan, fingers crossed, if Vegas can get Gensel or another team can, it forces Carolina to pay a price.
So here's my question to you, Alex, related to that. Let's just go down this path for a second. Forget all of the teams that we've heard rumored for Pavel Buchnevich. Let's explore it in this way. Who are the teams that should be the most all in on this year? They are in a winning window. They've got a real chance to win a cup this year. Set aside need, set aside whether or not they have been rumored to be linked to Buchnevich, any of that, because we know how Doug Armstrong operates. There's a lot of the times where it suddenly becomes oh my God, who acquired what from the Blues?
Yeah.
Army's not letting this stuff get out. He works quietly behind the scenes. Who to you are the teams that should be most invested in this 2024 Cup run? Based on their roster, based on contract status, all of these different things.
So I got 3 teams for you. 4 teams. Vegas, I think that's pretty obvious. They just keep throwing everything at the wall to see if it clicks, and sooner or later that's going to bite them in the rear end. I think they're obvious. I would put into this category the Carolina Hurricanes because of their pending contract situation in terms of Martin Necas might be gone. They've got 3 other guys in terms of their top 6 and top 4 defensemen that could be gone. And you don't know what's going to happen with Rod Brind'Amour. Is he gone if you don't make the playoffs? They got to go all in. Toronto absolutely needs to go all in. I mean, they are They are about 1/2 of a season away from blowing it the hell up because it's not working with all of these high-paid offensive players, and you've got a lot of weaknesses. And the other one for me is the Dallas Stars. I don't know if and they've already paid the price, gotten Tanev. I don't think they're going to do anything else. But Dallas has a lot of old players that when they're gone, are you as good? But the two that I would say have to be in desperation mode are Toronto and Carolina.
I'm glad you brought up Toronto. Because as I was thinking about the question,
I fell into his trap, T-Bone. Now he's going to bring up Parayko.
That was
way to
one.
go.
That was one of the two teams for me that immediately came to mind was Toronto.
Yeah.
Because man, you look at what they have on the other side of this season. You're going to see Austin Matthews go from $11.5 to $13.5 million. William Nylander goes from $6.5 to $11.5 million.
Mitch Marner's 1 year away from UFA status.
And so is John Tavares as well. Mm-hmm. And you've got a $5.5 million and a $3 million cap hit for Bertuzzi and Domi that had come in this past offseason on one-year deals that are falling off of the books. It's going to be hard to replace that middle six forward salary spot because you're basically taking that money and reallocating it to William Nylander and Austin Matthews. So you're investing even more into your top 4 forwards.
And you still don't have a goaltender, and your defense is one guy strong.
So.
Oh, damn it, I did it again, T-Bone.
Why wouldn't they be interested in a guy like Pavel Buchnevich?
Because I think their weaknesses are elsewhere than the forwards.
Sure, but you know what ends up making up for a terrible defense? Just score 100.
But you tried that last year with Ryan O'Reilly, and you got bounced in the second round.
It didn't work. Should you just not try it again?
No, I'm not saying that. If I'm them, I'm going after Noah Hannafin. I'm going after Colton. I'm going after my weakness, which is defense.
Fair, but if I'm them, I don't know that there's a defenseman that actually is available that helps me the way that Buchnevich potentially does. The other thing that you could do, and this requires some creativity if you're Toronto, but you could reassess things in the offseason. Mm-hmm. Like if you're them, you could acquire Pavel Buchnevich now. I mean, Vancouver might do this having acquired Elias Lindholm, a month ago now? Yeah. And they may flip him prior to the deadline to get a guy that might fit them a little better in Jay Ginsel. Yeah. So they could flip Lindholm to get Ginsel, and now you've got a guy that fits a little better, but you got a month of play out of Elias Lindholm. Good player. Nice to have. What you could do if you're Toronto, acquire him at a 50% retention, so you get $2.7 million on salary for Buchnevich for next season. So this offseason, you could then retain 50% of his salary. You could get a $1.5 million player in Pavel Buchnevich if you're another team. Dude, think about how valuable that asset is this offseason for a team that wants to acquire a middle six forward or top six forward. And now you as Toronto can try to acquire a defenseman with the whatever capital you're able to acquire via the Buchnevich offseason move. If you don't see a move out there as the Toronto Maple Leafs that can help you defensively the way that Buchnevich can offensively, and by the way, he's a really damn good defender as well, I think that's a team that we probably aren't talking enough about. And they also have a young player in Nick Robertson that is not impacting their club right now. He's down in the AHL. We saw him and what he can do for a team. I think they are a team that is not getting enough discussion as a potential trade destination for Pavel Buchnevich.
They've also got more pieces in the minor. They got some defensemen that would be really intriguing to you. Of course, they got the first-round pick. See, if I'm Doug, I'm going to discuss that deal in the offseason. Only because if Toronto gets...
But if I'm Toronto, I don't need it in the offseason.
I get that, but if you're Toronto, and I'm just putting my Maple Leaf spread Trey Living hat on right now. If I'm Toronto, I'm looking at defense. It doesn't work. I get bounced in the first round again. Now I need defense and offense, and Marner wants more money. If I'm Doug, the best case scenario is you guys decide that you can't re-sign Mitch Marner and trade him for a forward who's also a top six forward who's significantly less money.
I don't think they're going to trade Marner. I think what they're going to do is go into next year with Marner and Tavares both on expiring deals and see what happens.
Which makes sense, but if
you got to run it back. You've got to find out if this
you ran it back this year and you get bounced again in the first round. They might blow it up in the offseason. Sheldon Keefe might be gone. You might have to move that. At some point, you have to address your goaltender. I'm with you, though. If I'm Tampa, I don't know if I'm willing to spend all of these assets. Like, they want Noah Hannafin. They don't have assets. That's the problem. Like, they want Noah Hannafin.
Their next first-round pick is in 2026.
Yeah, they're the Rams of the NHL right now. They have no prospects that are intriguing to you. So, no, I mean, if you're Tampa Bay, I think right now you're just going to try and win this with Stamkos, Kucherov, Vasilevsky, Hedman, and see if you can go get a Noah Hannafin.
Yeah.
Edmonton was the one that I also think is desperate, but they opted to go down the middle than the winger, which makes sense. I mean, I think they made a good move getting Adam Henrique.
Somebody on the text line, by the way, said, guys, the Rangers tried this last year to go all in on offense too, and it failed. Acquiring Vladimir Tarasenko and Patrick Kane last year at the deadline is not the same as going out and acquiring Pavel Buchnevich. It's a very different situation.
Absolutely. But, I mean, I fall into the camp, and I know I might be the minority here. I fall into the camp that I think when teams do too much at the trade deadline, they put themselves in a bad spot and their team doesn't have confidence and they lose.
Sure.
Like, I think Vancouver's going to get bounced in the first round because of what they're trying to do right now.
Possible. But if you're Toronto, you're not really changing all that much.
No.
In this scenario that we're presenting, you're just bringing in Pavel Buchnevich, who could absolutely fill out one of those top two lines for them, add another defensive presence that is a playmaking presence on that line. I don't know, man. I don't think this is something that they will do. Yeah. But if they wanted to be aggressive, because this is a potential all-in season, they've got a prospect in Jason Robertson. That makes a ton of sense in this regard.
Nick Robertson.
Excuse me. Nick Robertson, the brother of Jason Robertson, correct?
That's correct.
He makes a lot of sense for the Blues and what the Blues are looking for at this year's deadline. They can now insert him into their middle six forward group, potentially even a top line forward. I think they're a team that we're sleeping on. And if you wanted to talk defensemen, maybe they're interested in a guy like Nick Leddy or Justin Falk as well. It'd be tough to make those salaries work going the other way, but something else to look at.
The more that I've thought about it, when I heard Thomas Hickey say that with Jeff Merrick, Carolina, I think, is the team that Doug's waiting out. And if he makes the move of Buchnevich, it's going to be Toronto or Carolina, and they're going to have to meet the asking price, which is a first-round pick, Martin Necas, and this kid Alexander Nikishin.
Who would you rather have? Martin Necas or Nick Robertson?
I would rather have Martin Necas.
Okay.
Yeah. I love the idea of Nick Robertson, but I think Nick Robertson at best, like the best case scenario is he's a second-line winger for you. I think best case scenario for Martin Necas, who's, 25 years old, is a top-line centerman for you. Now, he's not going to offset Robert Thomas, but, man, if I go 1-2 punch of Thomas Necas, that team looks good next year.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone on BK. The Rewind is next. Tackle your 314-day plans with the Battlehawks next Thursday, March 14th out at Ballpark Village. Celebrate all things STL with a free 314-day STL Battlehawks Town Hall event. It's going to be including head coach Anthony Becht and the Battlehawks brass. The event is free to attend. It will feature fan favorite activities, ticket giveaways, exclusive merch, live music, and so much more. Plus the Fast Lane, all one of them, will be broadcasting live from 2 to 6, courtesy of Sumner One. Get the details at 101ESPN.com. All right, let's head into the rewind right now. Alex, the Blues once again lose last night on the road against the New York Islanders. Some are saying that this was a scheduled loss because they had a back-to-back. The Islanders had plenty of rest heading into that one. I say that's nonsense. This is a team that should be highly motivated heading into the trade deadline. They wanted to do everything they possibly could to convince Doug Armstrong that this is a team worth investing in, not disinvesting in, trying to get rid of as many assets as possible. And it's been the opposite. Over the last 3 weeks, we have found out exactly who they are. They were frauds. They won 5 in a row based on great goaltending and exquisite power play. And since then, they've become the same team that they were.
Yeah.
A bad, poor, not good 5-on-5 team that is overly reliant on getting power play contributions offensively.
You're falling back into your old trends, and it's the trends that got Craig Berube fired. You're not holding on to leads. You've blown a 2-goal lead for the second time in the last 2 weeks. The other time you blew that 2-goal lead was against the Edmonton Oilers. You only did that once under Craig Berube, and you hadn't done it under Drew Bannister. You're giving up goals in that 3-minute window that we talked about earlier in the season. You did that last night against the New York Islanders. You're falling back into the same problems. And hearing some of the post-game comments, it's like, well, yeah, we let the lead slip away. Whereas, like, if you hear the teams that are fighting for the playoff spots, there is actual anger in that locker room when something like this happens, and it just feels like it's a hum-ho. Well, yeah, you didn't hold on to the lead, and we need to figure out how to hold on to the lead.
And I think a reason for that, it's realization. I think it's realization that, you know what the outside noise has been, what our show's been saying, of, you know, they're not talented enough. They're not talented enough to be a playoff team, and I think they're kind of realizing it. They don't have a middle six. The top line's inconsistent. Why? Because I think they got 2 wingers on the top line that are more second-line players, but have to play up because of the St. Louis Blues team.
And all of this is not to say that the future is, like, horrible as a result.
No.
I feel better about the future today than I did when the season began.
You got a top 10 pipeline in the National Hockey League right now with 2 guys that could be on your NHL roster next season.
And set aside anything that's happening down in the minors that we're not watching right now.
Yeah.
Dude, Robert Thomas has emerged as a #1 center. I didn't feel that way at the beginning of the season. We were talking about Sebastian Aho. Like, do they need to invest in a #1 center? The answer is no.
T-Bone was still very skeptical about Jordan Binnington. And I'm not just throwing you under the bus because everybody was, other than me, but like they didn't believe that he was a regular season goaltender. And look at what he's done this season. He's been one of the best 5 goalies in the league.
And I think a lot of that is because of his mentality. You can hear it in his post-game interviews right now. Like, he sounds like a guy that has a different mindset throughout the regular season, where he talks so much about enjoying the journey, the process now, as opposed to just looking for the results. And because of that, I think you're seeing him. He looks more calm in net. Everything you're watching, it just feels more repeatable.
Yeah.
As opposed to one game where he's great and then the next game he gives up 5 goals. I feel better about him in net. I feel like Jake Neighbors is a piece you can really build around right now.
Parayko, if BK doesn't want to trade him.
Feels like somebody that the Blues can actually have a part of their top 9 moving forward. You have a 4th line that you believe in. All of these are positive developments. Colton Parayko, finally a healthy season where he looks like, even if you don't think he's a #1 defenseman, a top pair defenseman, those are all positives, but they're individual pieces as opposed to a team that has coalesced. And that's what next year should be about, trying to get closer to, is adding more pieces to the mix that coalesce as a team. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Certainly hoping to see something movement-wise with the Blues. If that happens, we'll talk about it tomorrow here on 101 ESPN. The Fast Lane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.